they're not heating up in our atmosphere. Think about what happens in our atmosphere when you see a meteor popping in the sky, right? You see it
Right.
like coming in maybe 16,000 miles an hour, and it's popping through, and it's got a heat trail and everything else on it, right?
Right.
So these objects are moving at something like 45 to 55,000 miles an hour, and there's no heating. We don't see any heating on them. The intention study is what we call it. And it's about the fact that we are looking at UFO reports around all of our nuclear locations. In other words, where we detonate them, where we produce them, where we assemble them, how we move them, where we store them, where they are in missile silos. And so these objects, whatever they are, have a very strong interest globally in nuclear material.
All right. Rich Hoffman, welcome.
Thank
Welcome to
you.
the
I'm
show.
glad to be on with you, Joe.
Yeah. So, just so the viewers know, where are you located at right now?
I live in Madison, Alabama. It's a community that's next to Huntsville. Probably more people are familiar with where Huntsville is. It's in the northern
Right.
part of the state.
Okay. Great. Yeah. So, this is our second link up, and we're waiting. Tristan's going to join us shortly. And we had one that was in Italy, and we had not as many technical issues. It's odd how that works out. So, we're just right up the road from you. So, I have a lot of questions. I wish I could have had a little more time to do some research. So I'm just going to throw a bunch out. Sometimes too much research on my end is not good because I know more than I should, or I think I do anyway. So if you would, let's start off with just a little background on how you got into this type of work.
Okay, well, happy to do that. I've been at this now for 61 years, so it's a good part of my life has been spent doing it. I was in eighth grade science class, and we had an assignment where we had to do a 10-minute presentation on a topic that was on a list. I was late to class, because I had band prior to that and had to put my instrument away, walked across a field to get to the actual other building. Uh, and so consequently, when I walked into the room, the assignment had already been passed around to everybody in the room to sign up for a topic, right? He had topics on the list. And so my teacher, Mr. Bayshore, uh, God bless him, he put down the word UFO or a UFO next to, and I'm going like, okay, well, that's the only topic that's available for me to talk on. I put my name on it. I went up after class and I said, can you please tell me what is a UFO? And he
Mm,
said, unidentified flying object. I said, well, what's that? And wait, have you ever
sure.
heard of flying saucers? Or you ever heard? Yeah, but I mean, I see those are science fiction stuff. Why do you want me to talk about that? He said, no, you need to go out and do your homework, right? So bottom line is I went out, and I really didn't do any kind of major study. I had about 2 weeks to come together and do this. I think I might have gone to the library and found a book on my trip to Venus or, or my Saturnian lover or something of that nature. And
Right.
came back after looking at that and thinking that, well, this is just ridiculous. So I got up in front of the class, did my 10-minute talk, bombed it, got a D on that whole subject. My teacher started hitting me with all kinds of questions like, well, what about these jets that are shooting at them? And what about this and that? I said, well, what book did you read? Anyway,
Right.
bottom line is that I bombed it. And that was the day I went home in the evening to watch Walter Cronkite talk about a landing of a UFO in Socorro, New Mexico. And this was involving a police officer who was in pursuit of a speeder. And he hears an explosion over on the mesa, leaves them and goes over to this mesa area. and finds an egg-shaped object with some sort of insignia and two beings that were really small next to it. And his name was Lonnie Zamora. And anyway, so Patrolman Zamora saw this and basically, asked for a backup. He got backup that came a little bit kind of like late because the object actually now shoots up in the air and it's belching some sort of like blue flame you might want to think of on the bottom of it. It had landing legs like a that retracted apparently into the craft. The beings were now gone, and comes up, stops, and then it shoots across the sky. And anyway, I heard that and I thought, wow, that was pretty incredible. And there seems to be really something to it. Well, anyway, my aunt, a couple days later, said she was going to go to a bookstore downtown Dayton. This was in Dayton, Ohio, by the way. That's where I grew up. Uh, and what happened was, I said, "Let me go to this bookstore with you." And I went up and said, to somebody behind a desk, "Do you have any books on UFOs?" And so they walked me over, and there was a book on the shelf called "The Report on Unidentified Flying Objects" by the former head of Project Blue Book, and his name was Captain Edward Ruppelt. And so I started, the first sentence in this book was the fact that jets were shooting at objects. And I'm going like,
Hmm.
this must have been the book that my teacher was reading. Anyway, I read it, and it's like one of those books where I couldn't put it down because it was just so intriguing. And then I'm finding out that right up the road from where I was living at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base was this UFO project. And that's where the government was actually doing something. So it just, man, for a 13-year-old, it just propelled my interest into the topic. And I couldn't now get enough of it. I was starting to collect every newspaper article on them. I was getting articles and magazines, and as many books as I could get on the topic. I started, going crazy reading everything that I could. And it was about, maybe a year later, I was already starting to give like a little talk to, I gave one to an astronomy club, gave a talk, and spoke about it. I ended up then going off to some other location, like a church asked me to talk. And I'm now finding myself conversing and giving lectures on the topic about a year later at age 14. And by
At
the time I got
14.
at age 14, I was giving
Wow.
adults lectures on the topic. And at age 15, then I got a phone call from a TV station that said that we'd like you to be on this show, and it's the Phil Donahue Show. And so here I am at age 15 now on the Phil Donahue Show, talking about the subject, and I became suddenly the Dayton area UFO guy. so so now I find myself, continuing to get all these people that were calling or wanting me to give talks, and I ended up on TV and radio shows, and just I'm constantly out there, right? And now
Right.
I'm trying to do investigations and talk to people, and I had to figure out, well, what can I do with that? Can I get some sort of instruction on how to do an investigation, if you would? And I started to learn that there were like other organizations that I could get connected to, and they also had some forms. And then I started going out and just doing investigations around the city of Dayton. Uh, and then over a period of time, now I'm going out on the same case that a guy in military uniform from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Project Blue Book, was now doing the same investigation that I was. And so we kind of got, comparing notes because we occasionally, not very often, but we occasionally would bump into each other on doing investigations. And so now I get connected to the people at Project Blue Book,
And
and
what age are you at this point when you're talking with Project Blue
well,
Book?
I mean, I'm still about like
Approximate.
16, 17
Wow.
years of age, right? So
So
I'm
a
now
teenager.
getting,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm still a teenager trying to do whatever I can, right? And
Hmm.
so then in 1969, I got connected with an organization that was called the Midwest UFO Network, which is later becomes the Mutual UFO Network. And it was established in 1969. Of course, that's when the Air Force was now coming up with a Condon report to close down the project. And so they actually terminated Project Blue Book in 1969. And MUFON started to pick it up. And so now I was the state section director and a field investigator for MUFON, and I was getting a little bit of training, in terms of what I needed to do, and got a little bit better. And and then it just went from there. I kept getting connected. I started to now begin conduct. I was actually conducting training classes to other field investigators in my garage, which I set up like a lecture room, if you would, and started, teaching others because I couldn't keep up with the caseloads that were coming in. And so anyway, that's kind of like my story, and I've kept with it now for 61 years. And uh, that's how I got started anyway, Joe.
That's really an impressive start. I mean, at age 14, you're already collaborating with some high level
Yeah.
people there.
Yep.
And at the time you were doing it, I guess it had to be maybe a little bit of luck, but also some location, because I don't know how a 14-year-old around when I was that age would have ever had those connections, been able to even make those connections, you know.
Yeah, I think that the Phil Donahue kind of like gave me
Oh
some,
yeah,
I guess that helped create the impetus, if you would. And then people
sure.
suddenly knew who I was via Phil Donahue, right? Because he was real popular.
He was
And
huge at that time. Yeah.
yeah,
For people listening that don't know, he was like the Joe Rogan of his time,
yeah,
you know.
yeah.
Yeah, you weren't anybody until you were on with him.
That's right. Yeah, and I can remember the event. I was like, "Oh my God," I was pretty intimidated, but I mean, at the same time, I had a lot of self confidence that I could talk about it. I knew enough. I read a lot. I was starting to experience cases, going around talking to people, and I could still talk about that. And so I began to get an understanding about how to converse with, you know. Well, I mean, I had been doing lecturing, so I was not afraid of giving public talks and being out there, right? So
Right.
anyway, like, my communication skills definitely improved. And by the way, as an aside, it's really a funny thing, but years later, after I had been, became kind of like popular in the Dayton area, I contacted my science teacher, and I went back and gave a UFO talk to his eighth
Oh,
grade
that's
science.
cool.
And I told him, I said,
That's,
"Is there a chance that I could possibly improve my grade?" He said, "Well, you did an A plus in this," but he
yeah,
said it's too late for you to, to do anything. But it was fun anyway. It was a
that's a
great
good.
time. Yeah. Well, anyway,
So
so Joe, I mean
we
that's kind of my story. It's like I don't know. It's like one of those
yeah,
things where it's like it's one of those lucky things, I guess, like you're talking about, that it was just
kind
coincidental
of
that
the
yeah,
stars aligned, and no pun
yeah,
intended.
exactly. Yeah.
You
Yeah, it's
know,
pretty
it's
wild.
I've always, I've always been pretty good at public speaking. I could get up in front of. I've never been one of those that freeze up. I used to teach martial arts. Was always in front of a bunch of people, you know, a bunch of kids or adults, and so. But at that age, I mean, I'd say probably your age also helped maybe with your confidence, because at age 14, we think we could do anything. There's nothing,
Oh yeah,
you know,
exactly.
nothing.
Right. Yeah.
So,
It's
so
funny because I've also talked to other people, and age 13 for them was a very, you know, critical
awkward.
age. It seemed like that
Yeah.
they established their interest at about that time period or whatever they wanted to do. And anyway,
Yeah. So we were fortunate that you got, that you established your interest here. So I'm interested in Project Blue Book.
mhm.
So here's what's happened to me over the last. I've always had like everyone has an interest, but I've always had a really big interest in this topic. And some of mine comes back from sci-fi. I grew up watching Star Trek with my dad on Thursday nights. That was our thing. And still to this day, now that we have streaming, if I can't sleep at night, I come down to the basement and I'll just sit and watch reruns of Star Trek Generation and, Voyager and all that. But here of recent, there's just been so much going on in this topic area. Just like I was looking here, I was listening to a podcast. I'm going to pull this up really quick. We'll put this on. You may be familiar with her. I'm trying to be young and not have my glasses on, so that makes it hard. She's a Representative Anna Paulin Luna. She's a United States representative out of Florida, and she's put together some like coalitions to kind of, see what's going on and get some answers. And she's ran into some really some people with some backlash still today.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with her?
My mom started calling about, how about coming and opening a hamburger and ice cream parlor with me? And I said, no, Mom.
Hey guys, I want to invite you to my hometown, Grand Rivers, Kentucky. There you're going to find Patty's 1880s settlement. Growing from a small ice cream parlor into a world-famous destination, what started in 1977 with Patty and Bill and the Tuller recipes has blossomed into a community centerpiece. Thanks to the owners, Chip and Michael, whose vision has transformed Grand Rivers into a must-visit town. From the 2-inch pork chops to the towering desserts, their menu is as unforgettable as the amazing Christmas displays and the unique gift shops that line the settlement. For me, it's personal. I worked there as a teenager, learning lessons that I still carry with me today. And now, Patty's Spirit continues to inspire our podcast and other local businesses, helping us grow just like this hometown treasure. When families celebrate life's biggest moments in Grand Rivers, there's only one place they gather, Patty's 1880 Settlement.
We just have to enjoy what you're doing, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, she's part of, there's a group of congressional people that are involved in trying to promote this and getting it treated seriously. And she is obviously one of them. Tim Burchett out of Tennessee is also very active in it. You also have even Marco Rubio at the time when he was in Florida and stuff like that was also helped to put stuff together. You've had John Warner out of Virginia as well that was also is pushing for it. So there's a good number now of these politicians that we've been engaging with and helping them to be able to get some political action on this. In other words, get more transparency on the subject. You talk about Blue Book. Well, Blue Book, was big about going out and doing cases. It didn't get that many cases to begin with. If you look at the total history of the Air Force with Project Sign, Project Grudge, Project Twinkle, and then Project Blue Book, and all these different projects that were engaged in UFO studies since 1947, there were they only had something like 12,000 cases. I mean, we get every year there's almost now 200,000 cases that are being collected. And so that's our total. And then out of that, they claimed that they couldn't explain 701 of them. But if you look at a lot of their their explanations and the case investigations, they were not necessarily that good. There was probably a lot more than 701. But think about it this way, Joe. Would you feel comfortable about contacting the federal government to report your sighting?
I would. Let's just make this clear right out the gate. I wouldn't be comfortable contacting my government about anything.
Well, right.
There's that opens up a can of worms.
So precisely. So do you think that if I have a strange story that I've encountered something, do you think I'm going to call up the Project Blue Book or get a hold of that number? First off, do I even know that it exists? Secondly, do I know how to contact them? And then thirdly, it's a situation where what I'm trying to tell you is the vast majority of people who have sightings do not report them.
Yeah, I could see that. And
Yeah.
so I could also see that. I've seen that in like the military when you hear, you know, of course, say you're watching a movie, and this is just an example. Possibly a pilot might see something and then they're saying, "Are you wanting to report a UFO?" And then they immediately go, "No." Once
No.
they start thinking, and I think that keyword UFO kind of says, "Ooh."
Yeah.
But with me of late, so now you go back to Project Blue Book, and like you said, it was hard to even, people were skittish about even asking and seeing what's going on. And it was kind of a, I wasn't there. I mean, wasn't there yet, but it kind of seems like an X-Files kind of thing. Back then it was Men in Black kind of, and now you're having representatives actually come on the largest
Mhm.
podcast in the world and
Yeah.
openly talk about this. So there's been so much information. I can't even remember when it went from UFO to UA. The abbreviations have
Right.
all
Yeah.
changed of recent.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's maybe take the trigger word out of it, possibly. I don't know why that actually happened, but and then of recent, we've just seen so much information. It's overwhelming if you can't comb through it, especially for someone like me. I love it. I would love to just. I've always said if I could go back to college and go to school and learn. That would be what I would do. I just love taking in information, but I don't have the opportunity, of course, to just put everything I got into this. But now with so much, a person like me or maybe some of our listeners, we're overwhelmed. And then you're throwing in AI and everybody's just pumping out all this stuff, and you have to deep dive everything you hear to
Yeah. So,
verify
I mean,
everything.
bottom line for me is it's a situation where as technology has improved or increased, our connectedness to everything around us has also increased. So what I'm trying to say there is that, if you look at the information that you might have received earlier before the internet and everything else, information about what's going on in the world was probably very limited for you. And now you're so connected that you're finding out that there was a murder that took place on some other part of the United States through some sort of a media thing or whatever like that. And so suddenly
Right.
you're overwhelmingly connected to a huge amount of information. So our information that we're receiving now is every second we're being bombarded with something and we're looking at it. Well, the same thing holds true about why you're saying you're hearing about UFOs more, because bottom line is we have more communication means. We got social media, we got all this other stuff where I had to rely on a newspaper, back in the
Right.
early days, I mean, that was it. That was the only way for me to know what's going on in the world. Or if I watched television and saw the evening news. But I didn't have the internet. I didn't have any of that stuff. Now I am being bombarded with all this stuff. And yes, there's a lot of activity, but the question is that activity because let me paraphrase. It's now okay for you to talk about UFOs where it was a taboo subject before. It was like,
Right.
you were a kook. You were a kook if you talked about it, or
Right.
there was all this stigma associated with it. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Pilots wouldn't report it because they'd be hauled off to talk to a psychologist or something. Military
Sure.
pilots would, and it would end their career. Or the other thing is, you might have a family with very strong religious views, and you're hesitant to talk about what this is because guess what? They look at it as the devil, and you don't want to go there, right? So
Right.
you bottom line is you just don't want to talk about it to a lot of different people because they might be non-receptive to it. They might have all these other opinions about it, and so it's almost like a taboo subject to even bring up in an evening meal. But that's changing because now we're getting so much information about it, and it's also being treated respectably.
Right.
And so, my God, if the government can talk about it, well, why can't I talk about it? That type of thing.
Hey, I just want to make
Sure.
Can you guys hear
Whoa,
me?
there's Tristan.
Yeah, I did it.
Yeah.
Tristan,
I switched
yes,
to my
you're on
phone.
now. I can hear you.
I am
Hold
so
on,
sorry.
Tristan. I got to turn you down.
Okay.
Oof. You blew me out of the water.
Yeah,
All
but I
right. We
can
can
hear
hear
you
you.
now, Tristan.
Sorry, I did not want to miss this
Great.
one. I was excited to talk to you.
I know he has really, the last two podcasts we had a fantasy artist, which Tristan's an author, and he actually brought him on, and he was so excited about that one. And then when this came on, it's like, and then when I seen he wasn't going to maybe get his mic, I knew how disappointed he was. So
Yeah.
Tristan, we'll catch you up in a second. We've just kind of
Go
been
ahead.
briefly talking. I'm going to have to turn you down a little more, man. You really got it going now. So, this is so on the topic we're talking about right now. So you basically, just as a refresher, Tristan, we're talking about how it was so hard back in the late 60s and early 70s to get information. You were limited as to where it would come from. And it also, a lot of people weren't talking about it because they felt like they were going to be judged, whether religiously or psychologically or anything like that. Now we flash forward, we're getting so much information. Who knows what? It's so hard to decipher. Rich, there's a movie I'm sure you've seen. I'm a big movie buff, so you'll have to bear with me. Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Oh yeah, without
Yes.
a doubt.
So through the scene where they're talking to the congressman, the group of people, they're sitting at the table, and they're starting to get into some stuff, and they're being listened to. And then all of a sudden, this guy stands up, and he says, "In 1941, I saw Bigfoot." He slid, foot spanning so long. And I always reference that because there's a saying that says, "I'd rather have an intelligent enemy than an idiot for an ally." And so what happened in that scene, he got up, they were getting something out, and then all of a sudden that gave the government people an opportunity to shut them down because now he's making the whole group look ridiculous.
Yes.
That being said, with as much information as coming out right now, and you said something about you were thought up, people could, if they spoke out, they would be called a kook back in the day. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now you are actually, it's so many people talking that you're, for lack of a better word, you're getting some of those kooks in the mix. And
Yes,
I believe it takes some of the validity away from the others. Do you get frustrated with that?
Well, I did at one point. I mean, because it's ultimately, I grew up in the time period, and this is the cultural change that I've gone through. Going back to like the 1969 and stuff like that, the topic became almost like a joke. You couldn't bring it up. You might remember, I don't think Tristan's not, old enough to probably remember, but on the checkout counters of the grocery market, you might have had the Weekly World, and on the front of that cover would be Clinton holding a baby alien,
Yeah.
or there would be a handshake going on. Well, that was all CIA led to be able to use that tabloid to spread, the fact that there was nothing credible about it, and it was a big joke. And so they were actually helping to feed that kind of like propaganda to dispel the whole topic and keep the public, shut down from it, right? But sightings continued. And oh, by the way, while a lot of scientists that were out there kind of like went and became pretty quiet about it, they just they became closet scientists, if you would. Jacques Vallée calls it the invisible college because it's basically everybody's invisible, but there's a select number of these people that are out there that will treat it scientifically. Well, in 2017, what you saw was in the New York Times article that came out at the end of that year, the fact that there was legitimately a project up at the Pentagon that was studying this thing, and $20 million had been given to it to help it, go. It was called OSAP. And an OSAP that came out, we learned about a guy named Lou Elizondo. We learned about the fact that there were these 3 videos that were taken by the Navy. The Nimitz case, the Go Fast, and the other one, which was the gimbal videos that came out. Well, anyway, so what I saw was the fact that now suddenly we had already formed the SCU, Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, and that was to get the scientists to now study this. And we said, if we do it right and we actually get these things studied, then we might be able to help educate the rest of the world and dispel that stigma that's out there and have people treating it seriously. And that's exactly what we did. We ended up publishing papers. We were getting the word out, the fact that there's something going on. The videos were incredible. That became, the conversation started opening up. There were some people that started to feel like that they could come out of the closets, that were like even political people that said, yeah, I know about these objects. I know about these objects. We had pilots that were coming out and talking about them. Commander Fravor was talking about the 2004 Nimitz case. You know, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say, it kind of opened the Pandora's box to making it now okay for you to talk about it. And yes, you're absolutely right that in the background you got all the chatter of all the people that want to have conspiracy theory stuff. But guess what? They're being drowned out by the fact that we're doing scientific research, getting recognized for that, and putting out the fact that this is serious stuff, to the point where now politicians are engaging in it. And it's actually in law that they have to report it. So what we're doing now is we're building this consensus that regardless of the kooks that are out there, we're gonna push it and make it sure that it's treated scientifically, and we're winning.
Well, I would guess that the average person in today's world, if you ask them if they believe that there is life on other planets, the average person would say more than likely. That's kind of grown to be a much more accepted thing, like a much more accepted idea. I think,
Yeah.
now there is much more debate on if they are coming here or not. But you have
I always
seen
like
that.
to point out. I like to point out to people, especially that don't understand the scale of the universe, for example, that we're living in. And I'll put it to you this way: there's a great, I encourage people to watch a YouTube show that's called The Epic Spaceman. But anyway, the Epic Spaceman does a good job to show scale and size comparisons for people. You know what a Fruit Loop is?
Yes.
That little Fruit Loop cereal, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's pretend for a second that that little Fruit Loop is a galaxy composed of about 200 billion stars. And we live in that little Fruit Loop, is one little tiny dot in that thing surrounding our sun, which is one of those stars, right? Okay. So when we talk about the universe itself, take and fill up the half size of an Olympic swimming pool and fill up 355 of those swimming pools with Fruit Loops.
And that's just the observable universe, right?
That is, yes, that is what we believe is approximately the number of galaxies out there that each have 200 billion stars, with when we're finding out that there's multiple planets that are going around those stars. And it's ludicrous as hell to be able to sit back and say that there's no life elsewhere.
Yeah, that'd be absurd. I mean, haven't we even had like meteorites with like alien germs on, like, not like advanced life, but I'm pretty sure we've had like microbiology come into our planet that was not from here. I could be wrong there.
No, but your point's well taken. If you look on this planet alone at places and things like, extreme cold temperatures or extreme heat, you will find life. So why would you expect that there wouldn't be any life on all those planets that are potentially out there? And then it's ludicrous to think that that they have to think like us. They have to build spacecraft that do the same thing that we do, or that they've got to, so it's ridiculous to think that. And oh, by the way, that they, why couldn't they have come here? The universe, if it's like, 3.8 billion years old, you mean to tell me that there's not a more advanced civilization that didn't go through 5 extinctions like us?
Well,
right.
on the, I don't
Tristan,
really,
can you turn
So
your mic down a
I
little
yeah,
bit?
don't really have a way to turn my mic down on mobile.
Okay.
So
Um,
maybe I can do it in
well,
here.
on that topic though, really quickly. So, and I 100% agree with you. I mean, just you do the math. There's going to be no telling how much life out there, and we know there's water. We know there's these elements of life building materials out there. So, but here's the question, and I'm pointing out some of the things that I've seen that makes me go, okay, wait a minute. So, in the same context as what you're talking about, the size of the universe, and we're so small. I've heard it said that our reach isn't very. How would they know we're even here? How would other other life forms in the universe, because we're so tiny and we have such a small reach as far as, say, radio waves or television waves. How would they know we're here?
yeah, and so I mean, much like what we are, we're looking for technical signatures of distant stars, and we're actually seeing planets on distant stars that are they're millions of light years, maybe billions of light years away, and we're finding out that they can transit, and we're looking at the light and determining that there's a planet out there. But starting to look at technical signatures alone that can help us to know that. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, a life form that's, let's say, it's 100,000 years older than us would
Right.
obviously be able to figure out how to do that. And then, let's also take into the equation the fact that the UFOs are basically being seen going at interstellar speeds and being tracked on radar. Interstellar speeds.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Okay,
And
so
there's one in particular coming that I don't want to talk about that yet. And I think I know you know what I'm talking about already. Very interested in that. I think the whole world's a little interested. We got our Men in Black kind of antennas sticking up, waiting for that to happen. But before we get there, on that subject, so a lot of people refer to back when we had the two bombs, Nagasaki, Hiroshima, horrific parts of our history. But that's when we started to, maybe, I don't know if this is true or not, maybe it's just a timing, see more sightings. Maybe that threw up some curiosity to other life forms out there, that they actually seen that we could create fusion. Is that something you've studied at all?
oh yeah. Well, just to share with you that there's a large number of we're actually investigating from 19 roughly the early, like, to mid 1940s on to 1975. We've already published 4 papers that dealt with the the intention study is what we call it, and it's about the fact that we are looking at UFO reports around all of our nuclear locations. In other words, where we detonate them, where we produce them, where we assemble them, how we move them, where we store them, where they are in missile silos. And so these objects, whatever they are, have a very strong interest globally in nuclear material and
Yeah.
what we're doing with it. And if you think about that for a second, so instead of calling this the planet Earth, we should really call it the planet Water, because we got 3/4 of the planet is water, covered by
Right.
water, right? If you were an intelligent species wanting to watch the idiots above on the ground do what they do, you might want to
Right.
calm down and locate in your position a base or something like that, a base of operation, potentially underneath the water. You know,
Yeah.
we don't know
Um,
that,
Well,
and so now I pop out of the water and I come up and do my whatever I want to do, and then I come back and hobble back in the water. And if you look at the UFO statistics, you'll find out that there's a strong correlation with that type of thing, and nuclear material, and it with water. So those are the two
right.
major things you'll find. And so it's intriguing to me that, number one, that the Navy is the one that's doing all these incredible reports over
Right.
water,
Mm-hmm.
and coming out with it. The Nimitz case, the Roosevelt case in 2014 and 2015. That's all about the fact that the USS Roosevelt was out there and the F-18s were flying their routine range emission practices, and they were over water, right? And so we see this propensity for water, and we also see that that's going on. So, bottom line is, yes, nuclear is important, and it's been throughout the history of UFOs, but that's a very strong correlation as well as water.
So one thing I wanted to ask, am I still too loud?
No, you're good. Go ahead.
Okay. So one thing I wanted to ask, we got a little bit off the topic earlier. We were talking about why would extraterrestrials come to Earth. A theory I've seen being floated around actually is referred to as the dark forest theory, which suggests that either via the nature of life being too suspicious, or there being something out there that is considered threatening, that maybe all of the intelligent life is directly avoiding contact with each other, because the theory states we should have made direct contact by now, and the fact that we have not made direct contact is somewhat worrying. Like maybe there's a reason that they have not come down and directly contacted us.
Well, I mean, we're engaging them all the time throughout history, so we're having a contact.
Okay.
It's like, do I come down and talk to ants and say, here I am? You're talking about that these are a craft and possibly a life forms that are thousands of years ahead of us, tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of years ahead of us. What are they going to get from us? I mean, they relatively can listen in on all of our topics. I think it's interesting the fact that they go over into other countries and the people that see the beings say that they're talking their language. Do they know every part of our history? Yeah, potentially they do, because they appear to be precognitive. They know what we're going to do in advance of us doing it.
That's a good
And
point. Yeah.
In the Nimitz case, for example, when Commander Fravor is circling down toward the Tic Tac and they start to do a circle dance up to a higher altitude, the object knew that he was going to cut across the circle and was already reacting and then shooting off. And where did it go? It went to what they call the cap point, which is the combat. I can't remember, the combat access point or something like that. Anyway, it's like like a secret rendezvous point where Commander Fravor, was going to go next after the mission was over. Here's the object now waiting for him to come there. So there's precognition to some extent of knowing what we're going to do. And let me come back to it in a sense that I'm not saying that all these craft are extraterrestrial either. I mean, I'm not even saying that necessarily that's the only hypothesis. There's a variety of hypotheses out there that suggest that they could also be time travelers and us from the future.
Yeah, I've seen that. And some of it could be just our government itself. I mean, yeah. I can imagine our government has probably 20 years of technology ahead of what we think of.
Yeah. So bottom line, unless we right now presently, which I don't believe, but we've got some sort of machine that can perform in the manner that these are. And you have to keep in mind the fact that the objects in the 1950s were doing the same thing that they're doing now and going at hypersonic speeds, hovering, and doing things that we would say would, we had vacuum tubes, if anything. We had analog systems. We didn't have anything that could do what these things are doing. But anyway, so let's say hypothetically, you could have a situation where, and over time, we are what we do. And let me point it out to you this way. You watch Star Trek. So they remember the communicator, right? The communicator that they had, right? Scotty, we need more dilithium crystals, please. Okay, the bottom line is that we take from science fiction and that type study, and what do? We create that, and we have that work. So suddenly my watch becomes like Dick Tracy's watch, and I can do all kinds of things, So the bottom line is we tend to do that. And we build things like that. We think about things and we come up and create those things. Well, the objects were out there and have been out there for a very long time. So naturally, we're going to figure out, well, can we overcome gravity? Can we shoot off and do those kinds of things? Can we create materials that will replicate and do the same kind of thing? And so the humans are that way, where we take and we try to build something, and so it's very likely that we are potentially now out developing some sort of craft that can try to like maybe do that, and maybe we've had breakthrough technology maybe now, but that doesn't negate the fact that the objects from wherever they're from were doing it all along.
Right.
And let me point out to you the fact that there's a belief that maybe it's us from the future that are now have a time machine and can fly back through space, bend time, do something with it, and end up in our time frame. And we see it, and then it goes off. And where did it go? Well, it went off into somewhere else, right? Or some other time. So that's another hypothesis. Then you've also got the hypothesis about the fact that interdimensionality might exist, the fact that you might be able to have them pop in from nowhere, a different dimension, and then pop out and go out into their own dimension, whatever that dimension is. And we're just starting to get an understanding of these dimensions, if you would. And in every one of these scenarios, you have cases that can prove that hypothesis is legit, but there's a problem in the sense that all of them have competing things that can prove every one of those things. So we struggle with trying to say, well, where the origin is. And that's why you'll also hear the government saying, well, they don't have to be ET.
Right.
And so everybody jumps to aliens. Well, we don't know.
A variety of things. You mentioned
it could be a variety of
things. Yeah. You mentioned a second ago, you were talking about the crafts or the objects, whatever they were, they had some form of prediction. They could predict what the other ships were going to do. What that actually reminds me of, for something we're seeing in the modern world, or the modern world really becoming very prominent, is AI predictions or generative AI. So maybe that this is some kind of technology. Maybe if they are us from the future, or if they're another race of people who have evolved far beyond us, maybe they've developed much more advanced generative AI that allows them to say, oh, well, this is the most likely thing this person would do based on all these calculations.
Yeah, and you're absolutely correct. I mean, and if they've had all this history of watching and observing us and listening to all of our conversations, they know who we are, and they can figure out everything that we're going to do. And let's face it, the fact that we don't even know that these objects are not in themselves some sort of an intelligent kind of craft itself. It doesn't have to have anybody in it.
Sure.
But it has the craft itself is an intelligence device,
and
it's able to.
There is a.
I'm sorry.
Thus,
we're all got.
Yeah,
I think we're all going to say the same thing. Go ahead, Tristan.
Well, I was going to say there's a sci-fi book series. He's a movie guy. I'm a book guy, so we're going to have we're referencing different things. There's a popular sci-fi book series called the Bobbyverse, which is about a guy. He signs up for one of those programs where if you die, they freeze you and try to revive you in the future. Well, it turns out, instead of reviving him, they copied his consciousness into a computer, which then became a ship. And they launched the ship out, and the ship would self-replicate, and you would copy his consciousness. And you kind of see, like, him evolve. Like, he becomes his own civilization of clones of himself in the universe, going down and surveying planets. Yeah. That's what that reminds me of heavily.
Yeah.
No, you're absolutely correct. And that is that we just have no understanding. It's not like they come down, they land, here's what I'm about, here's where I'm from. They don't do
sure.
that. And so objects vary in size, shape, everything else. And so it's almost like we're like a zoo, and everybody's coming here to visit us from wherever they're coming from and just watch us, and then they go back to whatever they're doing. And it doesn't mean that they have to all come from one place either. It's like, multiple of these hypotheses could be in play. And so, anyway.
Okay, guys. So just briefly, I've got a couple notes here that I want to check us back on. I have, Rich, I have Tristan's my 25-year-old son. I have a 18-year-old daughter, and I also have an 8-year-old son. I started over again.
Oh,
My
very cool.
8-year-old son is here, and he'd like to say hi if you're okay with that. And then we'll get
Oh,
back
sure.
into this. And he might even have a question. I know he's had some experiences here of recent that he's been telling me about in our yard. So some pretty
Oh,
interesting. You may want to get his story one day whenever he's got. His
sure.
name is his name is Enoch. So and that might be
Okay.
something we talk about a little later too. The Book of Enoch.
Yeah.
All right, all right. There you go. Can you hear? All right, and then this
Hi,
is
Enoch. How are
Rich.
you?
This is Enoch. Good. Yeah.
Good to
So
see you, man.
Enoch had a friend over the other day, and had quite a few experiences in the yard of some what he might have called watchers, because he's Enoch. So Enoch,
Yeah.
you want to tell him a little bit of that?
So we saw these black things in the forest,
Yeah.
like big old black things, and some of them were flying, some were little.
Wow. So and then he took off. They took after them with the BB guns. So that might not have been a good idea.
Were they doing anything special, Enoch? Were they just moving around, or what were they doing? Could you
I
tell?
mean, some of them were moving around, some of them were just staring right at us.
Yeah.
Were you have a shape? Were they a certain shape of some sort? Like were they round or
I
square
mean,
or
one was like kind of like square, the one that we saw big in the forest, and then I was going by these weeds, and there was like a little one.
Yeah. So it's going to be an ongoing investigation.
yeah?
All
That sounds very cool. Well, you had a wonderful experience there. Keep looking, okay?
right.
Okay.
All right. Say bye.
Bye.
Yeah,
Bye.
thanks for coming on, Enoch.
All right. Rich, thanks for doing that. That was a
Oh,
big deal for him.
absolutely. Yeah, well, absolutely no problem. Again, I can remember being, kind of that young myself, and I got started at a very early age, as I told you, 13 years old. But I mean,
Sure.
anyway, it's never too late.
Yeah. So I want to get back. Kind of had a little break in our subject there, and now we can reset. So we were talking about objects, and a lot of people say that for, especially, interstellar travel, you almost need AI it would seem to be more sensible to send an AI out, because there's no time, you don't have to worry about life support, all these things. You don't have to. I know that they worry about people being in space for too long. Mentally they have to deal with that. So it seems logical that the first contact would be with some type of AI, or at least some. I don't guess it could be a drone. It'd be too far for communication.
So interesting pieces of information for you. So we have objects that are the size of a grapefruit that are flying around with the same kind of capability as the larger ones. So how are they performing what they're doing, and what are they doing? We think about it in terms of the propulsion systems, where they're doing things that, without any kind of propulsion system that we know of. And so again, we don't understand how, but these craft can move, that can they're not heating up in our atmosphere. Think about what happens in our atmosphere when you see a meteor popping in the sky, right? You see it,
Right.
like coming in maybe 16,000 miles an hour, and it's popping through, and it's got a heat trail and everything else on it, right?
Right.
So these objects are moving at something like 45 to 55,000 miles an hour, and there's no heating. We don't see any heating on them when we look at that. And we're saying, like, well, that doesn't make any sense. And then at the same time, you also have the thing where, like, an aircraft flying along, if it goes beyond the speed of sound, will create a sonic boom many times, and these things are performing at, Mach 55 times the speed of sound. and they're not creating any kind of sound.
No,
They're not. There's
That's
no sound,
I'm no
or they're
physicist.
not heating up in our. They're not heating up in our atmosphere.
I'm no
They're
physicist, but
not even.
sorry, I'm no physicist. That's like my weakest subject. But to me, that sounds almost like they have some technology that's ignoring friction specifically. Because wouldn't all of those
Yeah,
things, like
yeah.
heat,
So
sonic booms, wouldn't that all be based
right.
on friction?
Well, again, my point is that you tend to like look at these objects, then they have some sort of a. Uh, on the Nimitz case, when the object came back up to 20,000 feet and it shot off, the pilot, there was another pilot that was the Lieutenant Commander Slate with the female pilot that were Judy Dietrich. They were staying up there while Fravor did his dive and came back up. Well, they saw it when it came up, and they described. Commander Slate said that he saw a mirage-like effect around it.
Hmm.
So there's obviously some sort of like thing that's basically doing two things. It's either slipstreaming through our atmosphere, because of that, whatever that is, or it's somehow impacting space and time in a manner that we don't understand. And then also think about it in the sense that if it's dropping from 20,000, it dropped from 20,000 feet and it came down and stopped above the water in 0.78 of 1 second.
That's unbelievable.
Impressive.
I mean, that's
Okay, so 20,000 feet, and it's about the size of an F-18, no propulsion systems, it's tic-tac shaped, and it drops from that before I can say the number one, it's already dropped.
wow.
It's
Yeah,
already,
that is.
it's already.
Yeah.
Okay, now think about that in terms of what we do. Whenever we build something that's going to speed up and we want it to slow down, we've got to slow it down to get it to stop. All right. So out of that 0.78 of 1 second, where was it breaking?
And wouldn't
Yeah.
there be like an insane amount of like dispersal energy? Like if it was able to stop, wouldn't that like burn something?
It would. When we did the statistic, or we looked at it from a physics standpoint, when it did that, if it were roughly about the mass, or even one half of the mass of F-18 aircraft, and it did that same kind of thing where it could come down, there would have been 1 point, I think it was terabytes of energy that should have been released. Tera, how
What?
the kinetic energy was the kinetic energy that should have been released was equivalent of powering every house in the United States for a year.
Yeah.
So either
And that didn't happen.
Yeah.
That didn't happen.
that would like burn the ocean up a little bit. You would see like physical effects.
Yeah, energy's got to be transferred, right? Where did how did the energy get transferred that was being built up by that incredible speed?
That would have
We don't know.
That'd been
And
like a
so
bomb.
we had no kinetic energy release, we had no sonic boom, no heating up in the atmosphere, and no propulsion system, no sonic boom, and yet it's being tracked on radar doing that.
I think we got to go back to what you said in the beginning. You have civilizations out there that are going to be, Stone Age compared to us, but you also got a civilization that could be 100,000 years old.
Yeah.
We got a box that we live in, and we try to put everything in there. Well, we need to, if it does this, it's got to do this. We think when I say we, I mean, as a general, we think we have like physics figured out. There's these laws of physics, and they're being broken all the time because maybe we haven't got it all figured out yet.
Well, to your point earlier that you also asked, which was an excellent question, is like, why? I mean, so think about it. We have an intelligent species that's been on this planet through our recorded history. They've been on our planet through recorded history. If you look back at every civilization on the planet, you will find encounters with descriptions of objects in the sky or this and that have occurred. All right. So it's not new. It's not just recently that they came on the picture. It's throughout our history. Now,
Yes.
let me also put it in the context of this for you, and that is that so we've had this relationship with these things for a long time, and we ask the question, like, well, why did they come down and land and say, here we are? Okay, who would you go to on this planet?
Yeah, I think I'm following you,
Yeah,
and I think this is something I
yeah,
wanted to say.
yeah.
You're
Who do you go
probably
to?
not going to go to everybody on the planet and say,
Yeah,
"Hey, here we are."
right. Yeah.
Yeah,
And so, and then, let me put it to you this way: who would you trust is telling the truth about them? Okay, so we have a problem with now accepting truth
yeah.
because there's so much mistruth. And anyway, would you? Who should make the announcement that they're here? Is it the Pope? Is it the? Would you believe the Pope? Would you? Is it the? A president?
Mhm.
Does it have to be a United States president? Is there anybody here on the planet that we would get the planet to now open up and say, oh yeah, that I believe it now. Okay, I don't. Yeah, and there's a. I don't think that that's going to happen. And so it's kind of like a situation where if they want to be known, they'll make themselves known. They'll do it. They can easily do it, but
Absolutely.
they
Sure.
have not shown the interest or whatever to do anything like coming down to any part of it and saying, "Here we are. We're from this place." That and quit doing what you're doing or anything like that. We don't get that, right?
We
Yeah.
also
So I mean,
there's also the
Go ahead,
fact
Tristan.
that I should have looked at the number exactly before this podcast, but I know humanity has enough nukes on the Earth to wipe out life several times over. Now that probably wouldn't
oh
be a
yeah,
threat to any intergalactic species, but I wonder how they would feel they saw us and said, these guys have made it possible to wipe themselves out. They have put enough explosives on they've strapped enough explosives to their planet to wipe themselves out. These guys are crazy. Why would we want to interact with them? Why would we want to potentially give them our incredibly advanced technology to this species that is willing to have that many nukes on the only planet they have?
Well, if you would, let me address that, because you can take the flip side of that and also say, so say we as a humans, we see an animal and we see an animal that is doing something that could potentially wipe out its entire species. We're going to intervene. We may not
probably.
intervene where that animal knows that we are changing, doing anything. The animal may not be aware of it at all, but we'll intervene out of mercy. And is that possibly something that you'd be looking at? Say whoever, or the multitudes of the life forms that are looking, they would be like, this is a special thing. Life is a special thing, and we can't let them do what they're doing. Is that, and that could be a potential reason. But I also look at other reasons. There could be genetic issues. Say you have a civilization that genetically they've reached their limit, and they need to introduce new genetics into that civilization. That's something I just kind of thought of, at one time. Again, these are all just
So
ideas that we're coming up with. But
Joe, you're spot on. In fact, if you look at Michael Masters, and he talks about that, he's an anthropologist who studied this and came up and said that these beings are more like humans from our potentially from our future than anything else. If you take a look at a species, the life species on this planet, we're the only species. The human being is the only one that stands on 2 feet. Right? We're bipedal.
mhm.
And if you notice, like, our heads have rotated up from animals, where we would have, like, on floors, we have now rotated our heads forward and we're standing up like this and we're doing that. We have 2 eyes, we got ears, we got 2 arms and 2 legs, right?
Right.
The beings that are described by witnesses are having the same kinds of numbers of hands, eyes. They might not have pronounced ears like this. They have a slit for a mouth. Not very clear on terms of the nose. There might be little holes or something like that. 2 large eyes are often described. 2 hands with maybe like 3 fingers or 4 fingers as opposed to the 5 that we've got. Uh, Feet, arms, and legs.
So
So, it's reasonable to think that they could be us from the future. And now, why would they be coming back? And then, if you look at all the cases of people claiming that they were abducted, where they had sperm or they had eggs removed, it looks like a hybridization kind of program's in place. And you could theoretically say, well, they're doing this because they're trying to do genetic experimentation. And it's potentially because in the future, in our future, if we become homogenized as far as our DNA, we keep intermarrying with everybody around, and so now we become, and there's a need for some sort of, and that, by the way, that homogenization, if you would, is going to lead to our demise if that happens, because we don't have any genetic diversity. So maybe they're coming back, collecting genetic materials and stuff like that to help them survive in their time period.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, going back to your point about we might be a grand resource of DNA or other kinds of things like that to be able to help them extend life.
Some potential alternative hypothesis there, though. Once again, just pure theory. I have not researched in this at all. But theory A could be that convergent evolution. Because you look at Earth, I know crabs have evolved separate from each other. Like crabs have just happened in nature several different times. Maybe this bipedal, two-eyed, nose, whatever, is the most evolutionarily advantageous shape for intelligent life. Or potentially, maybe it's not, and maybe this is how they're presenting themselves to us. Maybe they know if, let's just say, giant spiders that breathe fire probably would be a little scary to these creatures that have enough explosives to wipe out their own species several times over. So let's send something a bit more presentable to us. There's a sci-fi series I just finished recently where there's an alien species that we never meet the alien species. Instead, we meet several of their translators, which are humans that they've genetically engineered to kind of understand both humanity and these aliens. So we're meeting these humans, quote unquote, that are very strange and very abstract. And that is our only look into these beings, these aliens we're hearing about, because we know they're better capable of understanding these beings than we are. But they're better capable of understanding us than they are us.
Before you get into that, Rich, I would say that there's a potential, and maybe we are getting a way out there on this one, but potentially these beings may have transcended transcended the need for a body like ours, and you're more of an energy.
Yep.
And I don't know, again, I'm not. I don't have the education to be speaking on it, but at the same time, even if you don't have that, you can be curious. And I have a curiosity there that if that's a possibility. And what made me think of it is Tristan was what he was saying. If these aliens, they would still need to be able to communicate with us in some way. If they had transcended the need for a body, they would still have to be able to communicate with us. So therefore, there would be some type of possibly avatar or something like that.
Yeah, it's interesting that the largest, the vast number of encounters with beings are that we're communicating with them, but they're using thoughts. So it's like telepathy or something of that nature that we would call telepathy, but it's not from mouth movement and moving air like we do. So ultimately, they can speak our language, but they're projecting it in our heads, which means that raises the big question: is are we being mentally manipulated when we see them?
I don't know.
Can they do that as well?
That's a good point.
I don't know if this is at all possible, but you see in nature where especially insects communicate heavily through pheromones. Could it be possible that these aliens, instead of using like psychic abilities, are producing certain pheromones that make our brain, like, you can trick the brain, you can do all kinds of things to make the brain perceive something. So maybe they're making a pheromone that is somehow making the human brain go, oh, this is what they're saying. It's an alternative.
Yeah, I could see that possible.
There's so many different ways we can speculate on this, but ultimately, and this is the problem we have scientifically studying them,
Yeah,
is that
Yeah.
we struggle with being able to put scientific experiments in place or to do any kind of investigations scientifically to know that if any of these things that we speculate on are legit.
absolutely.
All we can do is just know from anecdotal testimonies that people tell us. Okay, well, it seems like that there's a preponderance of these that seemingly know what I'm saying, and I hear them in my head, and they understand what I'm saying back. And so but we don't know how that communication is happening. Um, we just know that it does, and it's
Well,
very interesting.
if you think about it too, we look at possibly a civilizations 1,000 years ahead of us, and we think of their technology being 1,000 years advanced. But we could also take a step back and go, what if that race went on a different route of evolution?
Mm-hmm.
So, they evolved differently than we did. So therefore, they don't need the vocal communication. They evolved by whatever means to the environment they were in. They could be completely different life forms just because of that evolution.
Sure.
That's another whole thing to take in, and that's so much, when you really start thinking about it. Another thing that I wanted to bring up, we talked to Enoch, my son, and there is an idea out there. Of course, I'm sure you're aware of how often these sightings are referred to religious text, the Bible,
Yeah.
all these, Jacob's
Oh,
ladder. I mean, there's so
yeah.
many. That is
Yeah.
something that I've studied a lot. And the Book of Enoch talks about the Watchers, and the Watchers came down and gave technology. They gave iron, things like that, to the humans, and that was a big no-no for God, as well as they at one point mated with human females, creating a alternate race. And at
Nephilim,
that time, that's
the
yeah.
Nephilim,
And
correct?
then yeah, and then God came to Enoch, or those Watchers came to Enoch and asked Enoch to intercede for them to God, because they knew how. There in itself is so much you could just dissect and say,
Yeah.
yeah,
Let me put it to you this way, Joe, and that is, it's not just the Christian Bible. It's in the basically the Book of the Dead. You got also the Egyptians had. You also have UFO experiences and things like that in Indian cultures on the planet. You also have it in the Chinese cultures on the planet. The Indian, not the American Indian, but now the Indian in India. They have the Vimanas, their religion. So almost every religion has whether it be primitive cultures or various other things, have had these kind of encounters or these kind of like mysteries where they've seen things in the sky and they've reported it. So again, it's like, yeah, the Bible is look at Ezekiel's wheel that came out of the north. Look at all the, if you want to get into the comparison of the Christian Bible or the Jewish Bible, if you would, the Torah and stuff like that, then you start to realize that also there are encounters, spiritual beings, like what were the angels? Were they that came down and Sodom and Gomorrah, and everything else, and warned of the. So there's books that have been written by actually priests and various others that have all been about the fact that the Bible is replete with a lot of different things that we typically would think of as being potential similarity to alien encounters.
yeah.
And so, there you
Now,
go. I mean, I just,
I
There
would love.
was recently,
Oh,
excuse me,
go.
Tristan. There was recently they were studying a remote group of humans that hadn't had any contact with the modern world, and they'd seen that there was some type of vegetation issue in the area, and the humans, there was going to be some starvation. So we started interceding by dropping food. Are you familiar with this story? They were dropping food from airplanes. This was back in the 80s, I think. And then they kept keeping an eye on these. And before you knew it, these people started creating airplanes like out of
Oh, yeah,
grass
yeah,
and things,
yeah,
because they had
exactly.
seen,
Right.
they had
Yeah,
assumed that this God is dropping us food because they it loves us. And then you go back to Sodom and Gomorrah and how they were destroyed by fire.
yeah.
Nuclear weapon would if I had never
Right.
known there was such
Yeah,
a thing. So
yeah, exactly.
how easily we could be. Yeah.
You
Go
know,
ahead, Tristan.
when I was just one real quick point that I wanted to make,
Yeah,
and that
go ahead.
was that early when I was like that young teenager and stuff like that, I was starting to read about like the fact that this phenomena is global. It's not just United States; it's global. And everybody wants to speculate and say, "Well, it's because you were watching science fiction that you go out now and see UFOs." Well, wait a minute. Papua New Guinea is a tribal group, and there was a Father Gill down there that basically had an encounter where the whole group of these primitive people don't have television, and they're looking up at a disc-shaped object with beings on it, and they're waving at the beings, and the beings wave back. Right. So you have these very primitive cultures that don't have that movie or TV or whatever to stimulate them into seeing a UFO. Right. So, I
Yeah.
mean, it's a global phenomenon. Every civilization regardless of how primitive they are, have encounters, and so
Papua New
there you
Yeah.
go.
And
Guinea. Papua New Guinea is Polynesian, correct?
Yeah,
And
it's
that is
it's
that one of the
located just above New.
is that one of the islands closer to South Asia, or is that closer to Australia?
It's actually kind of like just probably north of New Zealand, which is
Okay,
New Zealand so you have New Zealand, and it's about 2 time zones away from Australia, and it's closer like to probably to New Zealand and above that than anywhere else.
okay. I was wondering because you were talking about a lot of early religions, how aliens were common, and, or not necessarily aliens per se,
Yeah,
but these beings, they all have something similar.
whatever they are.
They
Right.
most of the religions you pointed out tended to originate from either Asia or North Africa. So I almost wonder, and then I was wondering Papua New Guinea, because Papua New Guinea or Polynesia spread out from the South Asia. So I'm wondering almost if there's a stronger connection to Asia than the rest of the world. Like we love to think of aliens coming down and shooting lasers at the White House. That's popular movie culture 101. But maybe we're in the wrong place.
yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, if you want to look throughout history, you'll find out that we've had all kinds of like climate changes and various other things where you might have had an Arctic bridge that was up there, and people from Russia came across and came down into the Americas, and that was the
It's
Indians.
crazy
And then they
history, yeah.
proceeded to go down, and they ended up down in South America. I mean, there's all kinds of speculation on where these things were and how they moved around and everything else, but it's just again very fascinating that you have, regardless of where you go on the planet, you have these beliefs or these religions or whatever like that you want to, the faith or whatever, that they all talk to something that was from up there. you know
Right.
that comes down and either shares their wisdom. Why do we have pyramids in South America and we have them up in certain other locations on the planet? What's significant about pyramids? Why is it we all got and we use stones, that we were able to do such incredible stone craft, if you would, to make it so you can't even put a piece of paper in between these things? And how did you do that?
Unbelievable. Yeah.
And how did that happen? So, was it that we were just a lot smarter back then and we've lost that information? In other words, we can't even find records now of how we built the pyramids. And yet, if you take a look at the library in Alexandria that burned down, well, we've lost all that knowledge that went up in flames thanks to the people that came down and burned it.
Yeah.
We they might have had the answers of how we built the pyramids.
Very possible.
You know, I
Yeah.
mean, and it's all gone.
It's a
The thing about the pyramids too is that it's a worldwide phenomenon. You see in Aztec cultures the pyramids being
Yeah,
built in a very similar way. There's a
yeah,
interlocking. They call it a dog bone. It's interlocking. A lot of times it's poured metal where they have two stones side by side and they make a dog bone that crosses the two and interlocks them. Very
yeah,
similar technology found in totally different
yeah.
parts of the world.
well, I do
Very
Yeah,
know.
interesting
and
too.
Yeah, I find it also very interesting that there's a lot of bow and arrows that happened around the entire areas around the world as well. It's
Hmm.
like, why was this common kind of like bow and arrow came, or this same kind of like stick with we there's this ability to be able to have, around the globe where you had, no transportation over to the other place that suddenly has those types of things, right?
Right.
So I don't have all the answers to how we did it, but ultimately we know that there's this phenomenon that we've had this relationship throughout our recorded history and possibly even before that we just don't have it recorded. But I mean, every culture on the planet has got experiences with these objects.
You know,
Still have
to
them.
that
They
to
still
that
will.
point too, you see, we refer to, the Enoch and the Watchers giving mankind technologies, at the time, and there's a certain limit to what technology you can give to mankind that they'd be prepared for. You couldn't take cell phones and take it back to ancient Egypt and give it to one of them, but you could give them a bow and arrow. But
Yeah.
you fast forward that to, there was a huge explosion of technology in between the 50s and now. I think some people refer to it as a 50-year time span. We had technology that was 300 years of advancement. What we would have to take, and you're looking at fiber. I remember when fiber optics came out. Now you can buy a fiber optic light for nothing. But when it first
Right.
came out, there was a Cadillac. It was one of the first cars, and they had a fiber optic that came from the front of the car to the back of the car. It was like $5,000 because I remember one of them breaking once before. Then you had the cell phone, and all this stuff just kind of, there was no evolution. It's like, fiber optics. How did we get fiber optics? Well, because this particular fiber did this and we seen it. No, it was just one day it was not here and one day it was here. And it was far advanced from anything we have. And today we are talking because of fiber optics.
Yeah. Sure.
The linking of the internet through the fiber optics. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of explanation there.
Well,
How did we do that?
there's
Go ahead,
definitely
Tristan.
there's definitely the element of computers. That was a massive shift in our technological abilities because now we are able to compute so much faster. That's at least
Yeah.
that's at least one factor. Not necessarily discounting there's something else, but that's definitely part of what
Well,
got us
I will
here.
say though, computers in the 50s were not much more than calculators. So
True. Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
able to say,
Yeah.
that advancement was far beyond any computer that we had.
I
Go
live
ahead,
in
Rich.
obviously in Huntsville, Alabama, and then we got Saturn V rockets that are located over here on the base and stuff like that. If you take a look at the computing power of what they had on that, your cell phone, your one cell phone is way more powerful and more capable and held more RAM and information than they had on the analog devices that they had for that huge rocket that we sent to the moon. So I mean, yeah, we've advanced incredibly fast with the advent of computers, and now we're moving into the, of course there's quantum computing and figuring out how
Oh,
to,
that's
the whole concept of quantum worlds and stuff like that. I mean, that shifted a whole lot of thinking. The fact that you've got quantum kind of particles you can manipulate, or I can, entangle two particles, and that's
from
just, and
across the universe.
That's basically
they're
magic at
separated
that
by
point.
vast distances, and
Yeah,
they're somehow talking to each other to know that one spins this
Inst-
way, and when you do that, and then
instantaneous. Yeah,
I
and
remember.
so that just, how do you explain that, right? I mean, it's just, we can't even begin to fathom that, but yet that's going on, right?
There's a fantasy
right.
book series I'm a big fan of, and that's basically how the magic worked in that fantasy book. We basically found
Yeah,
out that that fantasy book's magic was real with some of this stuff, and that's
yeah,
insane to me. That the idea that you could have
sure,
those two things be linked, but not on a
yep,
physical level, on something else entirely.
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, and then also we look at AI. AI is moving at such a rate of speed. Um, they just started to, of course AI has been around since the 60s and there was even books written about it before then, but here of recent it's just made such a move. And I yesterday ordered food from a restaurant to an AI agent, and it got it actually right, where normally it would probably
Yeah,
be wrong. So,
I
but
know.
those advancements are, so that leads me into to something that you could have, these civilizations could be sentient AI. That could be a possibility, that we're being
Oh yeah,
contacted by an AI race.
yeah, very possibly. The description, when you take a look at the UFO abduction phenomena, there's an interesting part, and I don't spend a lot with it because it's hard to deal with the study of that particular phenomena. It's abused in the sense that there's no discipline. You can't get a doctor. If you have an abduction case, it's where do you take them? How do is a doctor going to look at them? Uh, do they have psychological problems? Do they have all kinds of? We don't know. I mean, and they are just there's not a discipline like you have with physical sciences, right? To study the mind and everything else that could be coming into play. But nevertheless, there's I look for consistencies in stories, and that tells me that there's potentially something to it, right? Just like, the description of the UFOs and by the tribe in Papua New Guinea or whatever. There's a consistency there. But there's also a consistency in a lot of the stories with the abduction phenomenon. And one of the fact that they're telepathy, it seems to be, or that they seemingly have these experiences where they are going through walls or windows out of a bedroom, or but there's also the fact that there's these medical experiments that are going on by beings that they describe as being more robots than they are live like us. They seemingly have no emotion whatsoever. So they're going through doing what they're doing without any kind of like emotive or emotion involved or whatever like that.
Right.
They're very disconnected, is the description. So
It, it
that's
seems
interesting.
it seems too. You talked a lot about time travel there. It also seems like a lot of these abductions talk about how the time. They feel like they were only gone for an hour, but they were really gone for a week.
Yeah,
Time really,
exactly.
they get outside of that space time,
Yeah,
and going back, and actually, if you consider, you know, and a being that's able to travel through from in light years sense, so they can get here from another galaxy via however they do that. That in essence is time travel, right? At a certain speed,
yeah.
you are
Oh, sure.
traveling through time.
Yeah. So there you go, and that brings up an interesting point. So if you take a look at craft and what we believe in interstellar travel, is that if you can get up to the point where you're getting close to the speed of light, as you progress toward that, we already know from Einstein that the time slows down, and
Right.
it slows down for that particular individual. So, for example, if you had a craft right now that could maneuver at near light speed or whatever like that, and you were wanting to go along, you could be on the other side of you could be at the other side of the universe in just a matter of maybe hours or like a month on the other side
Right.
of the universe. Now, you would have not aged. You would have only been gone a short bit. And this, that whole time dilation kind of thing, in the sense that, for you, it's been but when you come back, if you did decide to come back,
Mm.
we've thousands of years have gone by, right? And that's time
Yes.
dilation.
There's
So
a
if you think about that, you know, if I were going to go out and check out the universe and I was going to an alien race that had these craft, I would go to that location. I'd probably bring along with me whatever I needed to do it. I would go, at these incredible speeds. I would be there in a short period of time. I would not have had any experience of time for me.
Yeah.
It's just an hour for me to get over here to this part of the universe. I came here, I checked it out. I decided to stay, if you would, and study this species that's on this planet that we found, and I would locate underneath the ocean, bop up, and do what I was going to do, and just keep studying them. And then I might choose to go off and explore another part of the universe and another part of the universe, and just have these one-way flights, if you would. So, I mean, in short order, you could have civilizations popping up everywhere. And so this whole notion about the Fermi paradox, which is about the fact that, well, where is everybody at?
The Dark Forest one. They're just
Well, excuse me. You're not. You're basically ignoring the fact that UFOs are on the planet all around us all the time.
Sure.
yeah, they're just flying past
You
us.
know,
They're going somewhere else.
yeah.
Well, and
So
then
yeah,
when someone says, you say, where are they all at? And someone says, well, I've seen one, or I've experienced it. Then they just
Absolutely.
shut them down. Oh, well, you're crazy. Well, you
Yeah.
well,
asked, and now,
yeah,
yeah, I
yeah.
was going to tell you where they're at, but you don't want to listen. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Exactly. You don't want
So,
to listen, right?
in that, we're talking about speed, reaching the speed of light, but then there's a lot of talk now too about interdimensional travel.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? In interdimensional beings, I think it was Carson Tucker who kind of came out and started mentioning some of that about a year or so ago. And for someone at his level to start talking about that, and people really started questioning his sanity for a while. But interdimensional travel, interdimensional beings, that's an interesting thing too.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and so if we take a look at the JAL 8, I think it's 1826 flight back in I can't remember what year it was, whether it was in the 80s or anyway. The point was that you had a cargo aircraft that would basically saw an object that was tracked on two different radars, and so you have a situation where the description was that it was the size of an aircraft carrier that appeared out of nowhere.
Wow.
It just appeared out of nowhere. And there it was. And then it also disappeared. It disappeared. And so that you have the instances where these objects will appear and disappear. It's almost like, in Star Wars, or in they cloak like Romulans or whatever, like, or Star Trek, like the
Mm-hmm.
Romulans decloaking and cloaking, right? So we call it that because we don't know what to explain them. Or is it the fact that they, have the means to shoot off at instantaneous speeds, and we just didn't see it, so it disappeared, and we just missed it.
Well,
But
and
we've actually had
Yeah.
people seeing and reporting objects that kind of like, out of nowhere they start appearing, and there they are, and then they
If you
disappear.
guys can hear me,
And
I'm
then
having a
when
little
you
bit of
get
internet
into
connection, but you
dimensional
can
kind of things, then you
keep
say, well,
talking.
what does a fifth dimensional being look like, or an object? What is something in? We have three dimensions that we see things, and we believe that there's a fourth dimension. But what does a fifth or sixth or seventh dimensional being look like? And
so
potentially, are these
Mm.
potential objects that are outside of our dimensional range, and we're seeing them, and there they are.
so I was introduced to I was introduced to the concept from a very kind of silly source. It was a video about who would win in a fight between Godzilla and Hulk from Marvel Comics, which is a very absurd thing. But one thing it mentions in that is the idea that like casting a shadow. We are three-dimensional beings that can cast a two-dimensional shadow, but and
Yes.
by interacting with this world. So who is to say that if there isn't something in the fifth dimension, that it cannot do something within the fifth dimension that then casts an effect on our reality, and it sees
Yeah.
it knows what it's doing, but we are unable to perceive the source. We are only perceiving the consequence,
Right.
which
So
is
that's
Well,
where
that's
it appears in three-dimensional space, or wherever that is, right?
yes.
So to your point, I think that the idea is that you're dealing with a phenomena that can manipulate space and time. These objects have the ability to do that,
Absolutely.
and that they can punch out and punch into a different universe. There's actually, even going back to your Enoch and the bit, there's some belief that these things are actually like in that angel realm, if you would, or wherever that other realm is, and they're able to bop in, and that these could be beings or whatever like that are outside of that. If you've ever studied near death experiences, or you ever heard of that concept, people who are going on saying that they die on a table, and they see themselves now from the ceiling looking down at their bodies,
right.
and they can see 360 degrees all the way around with eyes that they don't have, but yet they're spiritual, if you would, beings. And there's an amazing consistency in these near death experiences. Are they in that area or in that space that's this other dimension? Is that where we go as souls after we die? And is that where these beings are coming in and out of?
Well,
And and that's also a plausible thing because people who have near death experiences say that they've also seen other worlds with other life forms on it. So that's kind of a curious thing,
so on that
right?
level,
Yeah.
could the next dimension, could that be thought or perception? Could the next layer of reality be how we perceive the physical reality? Could that be involved with whatever's going on there? Like, and then
Uh,
whatever life forms are able to tap into that, whatever, able to kind of poke into that space. Because if I think of an apple, right, you can't touch, grab whatever the apple is, but I have that vision in my head. That's somewhere, even if it's not within any of this space.
yeah. Sort of like computer memory. Where does it go when you delete it? You know, and
Yeah,
yeah, I can kind of see where you're going with that. That's an interesting concept.
that's very, once again, from someone who has almost zero understanding of physics. I was in the dumb kids
Well, I
math
think
class.
that's
I'm just throwing out these ideas that are,
well,
Yeah,
I
but go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think too that you're getting into something that could be, outside of the subject because you're looking into the human mind. Because
yeah,
some people say they think when they think they visually, they think of, if you think of Apple, Apple, some people think of it in words. So there's so many psychological things that you'd be dealing with there.
absolutely, that's true. Yeah,
Yeah, it'd be hard to tie down. I mean, any of this is really hard to tie down
yeah,
other than, yeah,
Completely agree. I've been trying
yeah,
to do it for 61 years.
right.
you know, I mean, how do you make sense out of nonsense? I mean, that's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with a lot of until we could get again data and information, and we're only starting to get to the point where we can do that because now we're starting to get to the technology where we can actually get data, right, and we can
Yeah.
actually do something with it. Prior to my early years and stuff like that, you may have had a box camera. You might have had a Polaroid, and you might have captured something on a Polaroid, and that's a pretty poor quality image that you got of a blurry thing. And I'm
Yeah.
going like that was my only form of evidence. Or
Yeah.
you might have had other cases where radar was tracking them and stuff like that, and that's a piece of evidence. But we're now getting to the point where we scientists are now getting engaged in creating and doing scientific studies with all types of equipment: infrared, lidar, radar, sonar, acoustics, all these different kinds of things that we can do to be able a spectrum to be able to now get data about these objects from multiple sources. And so that's for us the exciting part of it because now we'll make greater headway.
Well,
absolutely.
I think that's great, but I think it's a double edged sword there. So back when all we had was, the camcorders and stuff, and we were getting these blurry images, and was that a UFO or was that somebody throwing a baseball up in the air and getting a
Or a
blurry image?
frisbee. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Now we have this technology, and fortunately, we have people, people that are actually trying to research it. But someone also said we're not looking up much anymore. People don't look into the sky. We have the ability to record all of these things, in high definition, but instead we're all looking down at our phone. We're not looking up in the sky. We're not getting out there and
Yeah.
experiencing it.
Yeah, and I'm not talking about using any of your cell phones or anything like that because I ultimately, for that reason, it's not very good. So
Yeah.
I'm talking about military grade equipment that's being used that are very costly, by the way. I mean, I'm talking about like cameras that are like, $10,000 or more that can shoot images on a high burst level to the point where you can get 120 frames per second.
Wow. Yeah.
I'm also talking about you know infrared cameras that can read other parts of the electromagnetic spectrum, like the midwave and the near IR, and can see through clouds and stuff like that. So the same type of equipment that we're using in our space studies that now we as civil, technology people can actually use to be able to do that. And so that is the type of phenomena, the thing. We're actually encouraging the government to only, if you're going to be talking to the civilian population, if you would, not the military, the civilian, realizing that everybody's got like some sort of a cell phone camera or something like that, you might use them from a citizen science perspective to, in other words, have an app where if you see something in the sky that you think is strange, that you report it, and now it's got an alert, kind of notification that happens to other people in your area, of that area, and it also allows them to go out and to see it and confirm that they are also seeing something like that. So now you're getting a triangulation that's happening that gives you an altitude of the object, and you're getting it, from many different devices. At the same time, now you're knowing that you could bring this more elaborate gear in and use it to potentially also see something, including maybe satellites that are up there or various other things that can also help you to give additional data. And so we're also looking at going to hotspots. We call them hotspots because there are certain places on this planet where we see a predominance of these UFOs appearing. And that means that you can go and with some consistency on a periodic basis, you will see an object. We'll set up all your gear and have it so you can actually do something with it. Here's another idea. We created a honeypot. The honeypot is to attract the bees. Well, we're wanting to attract UFOs. What are they like? Nuclear. So set some nuclear, material out in a field, surround it with all the cameras and everything else you want, wait for the object to come over and just, to want to check out the nuclear or whatever that is. And you don't even have to use radioactive kind of like thing. We're actually now using something that looks like and sounds like and smells like it might be nuclear or whatever, and that it's not. And anyway, so
a little bait.
Now,
yeah. So now you bring the bees to you, and you surround it, and you get all the information you want.
do you think they're looking at us the same way we've been looking at those those uncontacted tribes who are making those pictograms of airplanes to try to are these advanced species looking down at humanity trying to attract them? Or huh, look at these goofballs. They think they have technology to attract us. Yeah. Maybe we'll screw with them a little bit.
I do hope that they have sense of humor and they're laughing at us a little bit.
I hope so.
But
yeah, well, I would wish that they would too, but they seem to be, according to the descriptions, not having any emotion. So
nuts, yeah.
Just be very professional.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the Skinwalker Ranch? Have you ever heard of that?
Yes,
I have, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, very interesting.
So a very good friend of mine that's actually lives here in Huntsville is Travis Taylor, who is the lead scientist or one of the lead scientists on that investigations that happened at Skinwalker Ranch. And they keep finding and seeing objects on cameras, and they got filmed. So they're like in their fifth or sixth season or something like that. Yeah. And it's just one bizarre phenomena after another, all in that one spot. Well, that's a hot spot. That's exactly what I'm talking about. You can go to these hot spots, and you can have a lot of activity of some sort of orb-like objects or something like that are flying around. That you'll have other kinds of strange readings, GPS or various other things, and you could begin to look at that and say that there's something. And if nothing else, let's say that it has nothing to do with aliens or whatever like that. It's still science.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
we learn from science.
Yeah.
And so it's still worthwhile to do something there, right? And to study it.
100%.
So we learn more about ourselves.
So let's take a little detour here. So with what you're doing and the SCU, right? The organization you're with. So help me understand a little better how your organization works. Is it 100% just normal citizens out there working? Or do you collaborate with the government? Are there government officials involved? How are you funded? You know, these are just questions that I have that makes
Yeah.
me curious
Yeah.
as to what you
No,
guys are
that's
doing.
fine.
So instead of talking about the aliens a little bit, let's talk about
Yeah.
you guys and what you guys are doing
Sure.
and how you're doing that.
So to give you a little bit of a background, we all there were 5 of us that got the SCU started, and we were all members of MUFON. So that meant that we were scientists that were engaged in the study of UFOs and investigating UFOs. I was the director of strategic projects. I was also the state director for 2 states. So that meant Alabama and Mississippi cases all came to me, and then I would assign them to my investigators. Uh, and there's another one of us that was the director of research. That's Robert Powell. Robert Powell was the director of research. He was leading the research investigations. He also had a team of others that were scientists that came together. We had a physicist, we had a mathematician, and we also had an environmental engineering individual and another state director, by the way. So all 5 of us got together and we were handed a video that basically was the Agua Dia case from 2013 of an object that goes around an airport. It looks like it goes around an airport, splits into 2 objects, and it goes underneath the water, comes back out of the water. It's very much transmedia, meaning that it's in it looks like it's in the water, it's in the air, and everything else. So we studied that for a period of time, and then we ended up deciding that we're going to split off from MUFON and become a complete scientific think tank composed of scientists. And that was about the 2017 timeframe where you now had the announcement about the OSAP program that I was talking about, and the fact that now it's okay to talk about it, right? So
Right.
scientists who had been in the closet are now coming out of the closet, wanting to engage and to treat this subject, and it was starting to get that stigma removed, if you would. They could start to, well, if the government's looking into it, I can talk about it, right?
Right.
That type of thing, right? So anyway, the bottom line is that they started talking about it and they started joining us. So very quickly, we've now since 2018 is when we actually got the organization completed, from being built up, and now we're over. I can't remember. I think it's like I know that we're over 300, but it might be even close to almost 400 members now that are global scientists, if you would. Not all of them are scientists, by the way. We have a good number of people who are just very serious about wanting to do the research and the study of the phenomena, and we don't necessarily like limit those people. We have people that as long as they want to support and say that they will support the study of this phenomena scientifically using scientific method and various other things, they can join. They can be what we call a community member, which means that they're basically we publish a newsletter that goes out to those members. We also engage them in various things. Then we have some people that want to get more engaged and want to be on a project. And so we have multiple projects going on, right? So they can engage into a project, and that's a contributing member. And there are some people that we're a 501c3 charity, so we don't have any big donors that are coming out. We have donors. It might be small or whatever like that. That's how we get money to be able to continue to do. And then I have a conference that I've been putting on since 2019 here in Huntsville, or either virtually when we had COVID and stuff like that. And so we get money from those conferences that also kind of help us out. So we have a very small bank account, but we're all going on the basis of just donations. So, we have up on our website, if you want to make a donation to scientific study of UFOs, you can contribute, $1, you can $5, whatever you wanted to do, right?
So we should link that in the
And
episode.
so we rely on, basically donors and stuff like that to be able to continue to study. And so we're holding conferences again. We're publishing a newsletter. We have teleconferences and webinars and things like that we do. And we've been engaging And we're also consisting of people who are former military or are military, or we have some people that we're connected with for the government. We went up and briefed the government in Canada, who was looking to understand the phenomena. So we actually met with the Canadian government and the leads for them to help them to formulate their strategy. We're also meeting and talking with the ARROW, which is the now the actual government organization that is in charge of UFO or UAP investigations. And so we're conversing with the members. I'll be going up to Dayton to visit family. I'm going to be meeting with a former member of the ARROW and stuff like that. So I mean, we're engaging politicians. We're engaging everybody and anybody. A couple of years ago, I was with Ryan Graves, and we were asked to represent the United States for a meeting in Bologna, Italy. And we went over and presented basically in Bologna, Italy for NATO.
Wow.
So, I mean, so me and Ryan were the ones that were sent over to talk about UFOs.
The guy
So we went over and we talked with and briefed the people at the NATO thing that we were at in Bologna, Italy, on the subject. And we told them that it's very important that they get engaged and they help work with us in the United States to be able to get reports, because ultimately their pilots are seeing the same thing as our pilots. Their countries are seeing the same thing, and so why don't we start to figure this out, right? And so you're talking with a guy that's connected to all these different players and stuff like that. And I'm having conversations. I'm having conversations every day on my phone in groups with all those people.
Yeah, well, look here, you got Tristan and Joe.
Yeah.
How much bigger can it get?
I certainly have Michael Lee up there, and
you remember, and the
guy.
So
I know Tristan's wanting to say the guy that we interviewed
had on
last.
Was from Bologna, Italy. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought my bad.
That's okay. I told him at a different time.
Yeah,
but I could tell he was wanting to get that out so bad. Michael Lee, though, I would like to give him a shout out. Chip and Michael Lee. That's how we got connected. They own a little, well, not a little restaurant, it's a restaurant here local called Patty's. And as a matter of fact, their episode that I did with them just went up this weekend, so it's on our channel now.
And I've already watched it. I've already watched it.
Oh, yeah?
Already?
Yeah, I've already watched. No, I'm a subscriber now. I already
Awesome.
watched.
That's great. Yeah.
No, I just want to share with you that was pretty nice for me. We were up on a vacation, and we went to I was actually staying in Miss Patty's former house.
Her house. I house sitted there when I was a teenager. I house sitted that house.
I was there, and so we stayed in that house. My wife and I and our daughter, and so we were all three in that place and just loving it because it was just so cool. And we had been to Patty's 1880 settlement, on two previous occasions. Mm-hmm. And anyway, this was another opportunity, and I was intentionally wanted to go see and show my daughter who lives in Spain. I wanted to show her like free roaming buffalo and everything else that's in the land between the lakes, right? And so we absolutely love the fact that we went over there. Well, the funny thing about it is my license plate on my van is UFOXPRT, a little play on UFO expert, right? Without the E's, right? So I've got that on my license plate. Well, that was parked in a way that here's Michael Lee driving on his cart or whatever he did, and he's seeing that license plate, and he's an avid UFO guy. I mean, he's been studying this for a while. He's like, who is this person that's in Miss Patty's? And so he knocking on the door, and then my daughter goes and answers the door, and here's this guy that's out there that wants to speak to me and finds out who I am. And then he had actually written my name on his document that he had, so he knew me. He was going like, "Oh my God, I can't believe this is Rich Hoffman," because he saw me on. He saw me on probably shows like I'm on History Channel. The proof is out there, and History's Greatest Mysteries, and a whole bunch of those kind of shows. And I'm on so many podcasts that if you just do a Google on Rich Hoffman UFO and either YouTube or whatever, you'll see I'm everywhere. But I've been at this for 61 years, right?
Absolutely.
So Anyway, the point was he was going like, "Oh my God, this is Rich Hoffman," and then anyway, that's how we all got connected. And then the
Yeah.
next day, I got to go. In the morning, they invited us up for to there's another play, Rose
Yeah. It's the Rose by the
something.
Lake,
Yeah, and anyway,
or Rose over
we
the
got to
Lake.
go
I'm
up
sorry.
there for their breakfast,
Hmm.
and then I met Chip, and so
Yeah.
that was a
He's a
treat for
character.
me. So
Yeah. Chip
I'm
is
thrilled
fun.
about it,
So
and that's
Chip was
how we
telling me
came to
this.
do it.
Chip was telling me about you and the story of how Michael and you sit down, and he said, "Yeah, Mike, because
Very.
Michael's very professional, very,
Yeah,
he to get him to sit down and do the podcast was hard, but he said, yeah, he sat down and talked to him for 2 hours. I can't remember the last time we talked for 2 hours. It was funny, but yeah, they're really cool people, and they've actually given me a lot of guests, and this is one of my big. I'd say you're probably, as far as celebrity, you're one of the biggest so far. So, but at the same time, you made it because now you're on my show. So after 61,
well,
61
this is
years, you
this is
finally
You
made it.
did it. You did it.
I
Congrats.
finally made the big time here. Let me
Yeah,
tell
you
you,
broke through.
I am.
Hmm.
It's great.
So, are you okay on time? I know we're getting close to the 2 hour mark.
I'm
You
I'm good
good?
to go.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So I have a few other things I'd like to talk about. So one of them is, so when you went to Bologna in Italy, I guess I'm a dad, and when dads sit around, everybody goes to the dinner, and the dad is sitting around going, "Wow, I wonder how much the power bill is here," because all the lights,
I'm gonna get
So
a drink.
that's
I'll be
my
right back.
mentality.
I'm still gonna get a drink, so I'm gonna stand up.
So
I can hear you though still. Sorry.
So my question would be, you say your organization is funded by donation. How do you is that something you got to kind of pitch in on and for those kind of trips, or do you actually make enough to be able to afford to send you there?
Well, in the case of representing the United States, I was actually paid for they
Okay,
paid for my flight, they paid for the lodging that I was in. I didn't have to pay anything.
right.
So
Okay, so that was
because
that was something
that
outside your
yeah,
organization. Gotcha.
exactly. And I I have since I was younger, I've taken everything out of hide. It's all been and most all of us that do this work uh, are not being paid for it. So there's no salary, no nothing coming in. I'm not one of these people that wants to go on a circuit and charge $1,000 for me to talk about anything, and so it's always been free.
Sure.
And so this whole thing, the phenomena, everything I've done with it, my vast library is out of my own pocket, and
Right.
so I mean, but we're trying to get the donations now to support the scientific study that we want to do, which includes having equipment that we can go out and to do the things we talked about, where we're collecting scientific data. And again, that technology gear is very, very expensive to obtain. That high speed camera. I mean, I'm talking about is probably like $5,000 to $8,000 just for that. And if you want to get acoustic kind of systems, or if you want to get other kinds of systems, it all requires capital expense, and we just don't have that. And
Yeah.
so we rely on just donations to be able to help us out. And we're also trying to. There are some people out there that have actually got technology gear that they've invested in, and we're trying to partner with them to help give our scientists data that they can go look at and analyze and try to get a better understanding of the phenomena. So we're trying to build this consensus and cooperation and collaboration amongst all the different groups and things like that are out there, uh, to share data and share the information, and let's get some answers to this stuff.
Well, that being said, of course, when we're talking about financing, money gets a lot of things done. So if you
Oh
had
yeah,
if you needed to go to Mexico and there was a sighting there and you needed to send a team, a lot of people, if I was on that team, I'd be like, oh, I don't know if I can go out there for 2 weeks and be able to pay my light
sure,
bill at home. So funding
yeah,
is crucial. And now you
huge.
see the
Well,
government. I mean, we just recently seen some of the fleecing of America, with some of the inquiries into what we're funding, and it gets frustrating when you see the things that maybe we're funding, and some of these things were misrepresented. But at the same time, I know the government funds a lot of things that aren't really beneficial to us as much as what they're spending. When is the government going to step up? If they say they have no information to give us, they don't know any more than we know. That's kind of what I feel like they're saying. So if that's the truth, why aren't they stepping up and putting some people in position where they can be financed to really deep dive into something like that? Do you see the government ever? You've had some experience there.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm working for the last 30 years. I've been working for the Army. I'm in the IT world for the Army. So I mean,
Yeah,
I see how they get funded, and I see how limited the funding is. I see also how there's also challenges to be able to get things to go through, and you might have an idea for making improvements, and it's like there's so many obstacles to doing that. It's a challenge, because of limitations of funding. We're sitting over here on the base with buildings that are from the 1940s yet, because it's horrible. I mean, but there's not funding for that because everybody's competing to have that same kind of
right.
dollar that's out there, right? So the challenges we've had is what's the priorities? What is the military's priorities? Well, the military's priorities are to go over and defend us.
Yeah,
That's what the priority is. It's over to
sure.
kill the bad people. It's over there to do what it needs to do to be able to protect the American way of life, and that's what our military is about. So guess what? That's about most of our money spending on weapon systems, which is what their job is, to go out and to defend
Absolutely.
everything that we're doing, and we want to support that. That's our greatest priority. Support the soldiers if they go out in the field, give them the best equipment, give them the best, the food, all that wonderful logistics that they need to be able to continue to do their mission, right? So
Sure.
it's not about studying UFOs.
I can see that, but
Okay,
you got a certain amount of
so
recon. If you send the
so
military out to
yeah,
an area where there's a potential threat, they're going to send recon out there, and maybe we need to start looking at that as there's so much information saying that we are being visited. Shouldn't we want to have a little recon on
yeah.
understand,
So
are these friendly? Are they here to help? Are they just studying us like we're monkeys?
And if they have the
Joe,
Where do we,
technology to,
so let's take a look at it, because what happened was, remember, it was a joke most of my life to
right?
get into it. The Air Force closed the project and said that we looked into it. It was all just ash and trash. There was nothing to it, right? So they were able to do that for like how many decades? Decades.
Yeah.
It
Even
wasn't
still to the
until
day,
20
still, I mean, we
in,
still deal with it
until
on a level.
right in 2017, it's that you find out that there's a project that was going on which was doing that data collection, and it had that Nimitz information, and it had that stuff like that, but it was fighting to be able to get recognized, because the war efforts were more important than whatever this was. And if you notice that what happened was that they started to talk about these things in a whole different other way. They were talking about them being a threat.
Right.
That and that allowed the conversation with politicians to now say, we can talk about it because it's a threat. It's a threat to our civilization. Our way of life. We don't know what they are, and we don't know their capabilities, and we don't need it. So that, by calling it a threat, now allowed the military to say, well, wait a minute, we need to do something to look into that, and we need to protect ourselves. And that's what their politicians are relying on now with conversations and the military world. Okay, so now you're starting to get traction where you can get that funding. And then we're also having to figure out that, well, guess what? That at-FLIR camera that we've got on the F-18 that happened to capture that Nimitz object, or the Spy 1 radar that we had, which was a phased radar system. They're starting to capture these objects now because we've advanced in technology, but the technology is put together and it's calibrated not to look for UFOs. It's looking for missiles, or it's looking for something else, or it's looking for things that it's not the proper calibration to actually get a study of UFOs. Well, they're now starting to think about, well, wait, we're
Excuse
starting to
me. I'm
capture
sorry.
it on our aircraft. Now let's start to figure out how we can calibrate it to go and look for UFOs. And
Right.
so that's what's happening, is you're starting to see this transition over to technologies to where they are now looking across government and saying, well, wait a minute, do these things show up on weather radar? Yeah, they actually have been picked up on weather radar. Okay, well, maybe we can get NOAA to help us out with that. Oh, let's also get the National Guard, or let's get let's get the FBI involved. And so they're starting to do that now, and we're way in the infancy yet of all that stuff, and it's not as cohesive as you'd like to think, where they're all willingly sharing all this wonderful information, but they're starting to. So we have to give them time and keeping encouraging them along, because anything in government takes forever to get it going.
Yeah. So
It
when
doesn't
you talk,
happen overnight. It happens over a period of time.
so when you talk about these government agencies, when you say it, you're like, it seems like you're saying that they are as in the dark as we are on
They
some
are.
of these. You
They are.
believe that? Do you believe that there is any?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, you got to look at this way. And I'm just going to try and tell you, the vast majority of the government is not interested in UFOs. And we have a tendency to want to say that the government should know all this wonderful stuff. Well, who in the heck is the government? Who are that?
Exactly.
Who is that?
Yeah.
Are you telling me that the 90,000 people that work in Army Material Command who work in the government know about UFOs? No.
Right. There's no way
Do
you
they
could
even care
contain
about
that.
it? No. They don't
Yeah.
care. They care about getting paid to make that widget that goes on that aircraft, or
Sure.
feeding soldiers,
What do you
and
mean?
they're not interested in UFOs. And so, bottom line is that we keep thinking the magic government's got all the wonderful answers. Well, let me tell you, it's a situation where they're in the dark just as much as we are, and there's probably some small group that's out there. And my perspective is, it's not even in government; it's in the contractors, the defense contractors industries that are working for the government, and
Mm-hmm.
that's intentional, by the way. So Lockheed Martin or Raytheon or some of these corporations have maybe got way more information, and that's a way for me as a government employee or elected whatever that switches out every like so many years from elections. They don't have any of the
Deniability.
knowledge or the
Yeah.
and it gives them plausible deniability.
Sure.
They're protected from knowing what's going on at Lockheed Martin down in that building that they've had for decades. And
Yeah.
so, we're constructed that way. And then there's the national security oath that I signed. Well, I'm aware of classified information, but do you think I'm going to put that out there? I'm told that I can't do that for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So how are you going to ever know the things that are classified, or how are you going to know about what's in that closet down in Lockheed Martin's building in such and such a place? You're never going to know.
But are there people that do? That's the question. I think a lot of
Yeah.
people in my position go, there's maybe not the 90,000, military in this one area, but is there a group that are aware, and probably more aware than even like our president or, our actual government? There's, that actually could sit there.
Yes. The answer was, even with the OSAP program, it was a small group of people that were there, and nobody knew about it. Everybody think it was, it was a weapon system thing that was doing. Nobody knew about it. It was like not until people became aware that OSAP was there and ATIP was there, that nobody knew about it. And then even when they were trying to be able to get it up to General Mattis, like Lou Elizondo will tell you that he was trying to get the information up to Mattis, he had all kinds of protections. People were saying, no, we're not going to deal with that. Because guess what? Going back to some of these people who are religious,
Yeah.
not wanting to talk about it, and that's devil stuff. And why am I going to bring that up to General Mattis? Because that's all demonic, and
Sure.
you need to shut that off, right?
Yeah.
So
You're also
everybody
seeing.
wants to give the government. There's too much watching, the science fiction shows on television that sees the government as being an all powerful, all knowledgeable, and that is just so far from the
Oh,
truth.
absolutely.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But you also see with some people, they will, to a degree, they will accept the idea of extraterrestrial elements. But instead of saying, "Oh, this is alien," they will say, "Oh, this is real. These are devils and demons, and we got to go eliminate this." Or I've seen that even within some pretty prominent people who are looking at proof of extraterrestrials, and they're saying, "No, this is proof that I am right, and we should enforce my
Right.
beliefs of various beliefs." Not so you have that issue of, even if we do have this element of proof, humans are really good at spinning information to fit their narrative.
Right.
Without a
We can,
doubt.
yeah, I mean, we can make it mean whatever. If you showed me a alien cadaver, I could somehow spin it to make someone believe that this is
Yeah.
proof that fairies are real. Like that could
Right.
that's just how people work.
Look at
Yeah.
the complete polarity that we have in the country right now. I
Yeah.
believe this. What is ground truth? How do I
Absolutely.
determine truth anymore? I can't even determine truth because your truth is different from my truth. And how do we, and so bottom line is we've got a whole society of people with their own individual sense of truth. What's true, what I believe is different from what you believe. Their that faith, and by the way, religion is like very much that way, where religious groups fight with each other. They don't believe this, and I don't believe that,
Even
and you
with no
believe this,
religion.
and so it's no different with the UFO phenomena,
Absolutely.
in the sense that we got everything, everybody believing everything, thinking, look how many people were on social media that suddenly became vaccinated. When COVID came out, I know everything about vaccinations, and I know all this.
Oh, sure.
They promoted themselves as being like the experts on vaccinations or whatever like that. And how much of that was that they were buying into watch? I just watched that on a show, or I watched it
Yeah.
on this, or I watched it on that, and that's what they're basing their conclusion on. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm sorry, but that's a problem, and this is what we experience all the time, that everybody and their brother believes something, and we as scientists come back to show me evidence to that, and show me the proof,
Yeah.
and
Where's your research?
give me,
Yeah.
yeah. And where did you get that idea? Well, I got it from watching, some show. Okay, well, you got it wrong because the show
Absolutely.
actually showed it incorrectly,
Yeah.
Yeah,
you know,
and you get
Yeah.
and so there you go.
And
exactly. You have even me.
the biases that are put in there, people have their
Absolutely.
own
Yeah,
biases,
yeah,
and
we are
sometimes
so biased.
You can see that in
sometimes you can
acting
actually
too.
prove someone wrong, and they say, well, I just, you can actually give them facts, and then they'll say, well, that's just the way I see it, or that's the way I feel. Well,
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
the
you're not getting
science.
anywhere with
You
that.
can't. I mean,
Yeah.
even with this conversation, I've referenced I don't know how many sci-fi books, and like, yeah, that's probably not the best. You can see that bias even within myself, where I'm saying, oh well, this
yeah,
is how this one sci-fi book portrayed aliens, so more than likely that has. And whether or not that's accurate, the book itself is accurate is one thing. It's more so that you can see how people really easily cling to their
yes,
experiences over
yeah.
actual like research.
Well,
And
on that note
we've become
too,
a
I'm
society
sorry.
of
On
gullibility.
that note, we can say, at the same respect, you can say, okay, well, you watch too many sci-fi movies, and now you're seeing things. But at the same time, we can reverse that and say these movies are potentially are influenced by things that other people have brought out. Where did the idea of the UFO or the alien come from? Was that just somebody's imagination? Was that planted in someone's imagination so that we could, start, a means of communication? Not all of them, of course, but we could see that as a potential, and we see another form of that. We see science fiction becomes science. If we
AI
look
is a
at,
big
of
one.
course, I reference Star Trek all the time, but we look at Data, an android that it becomes sentient AI. We see the holodecks where you have holograms become sentient AIs. And now here we are 50 years later or 30 years later, and we're seeing some of these things actually happen. Is that influenced because we've seen it and we're being influenced as a direction? I don't know. Those are some questions there too.
You could sit here endlessly and speculate about this whole phenomenon because it's just
It's so
until we
much.
and this is why that we tend to get. I tend to believe more things that are done with like sensors and cameras and data than I
Sure.
do with human beings, because human beings are fallible individuals that have a bias, or they have people are reporting
Emotions.
things and they are emotion about it. They have their beliefs about it, so they misinterpret it wrong. There's the lack of memory that they've got that's accurately depicting what they saw. So you can see that with accidents where multiple people. I saw something different than you did,
Yeah.
and so
Emotion plays a big part of it.
we just are not good sensors and recorders of what may have transpired, and science wants to have that because not that
You,
scientific equipment can't be problematic, but if you have it calibrated and you do the right experiment, then you might be able to get better data. And that's why we struggle with, is there water on Mars or not? Let's wait until we get all the data from all these different kinds of scientific before we now say yes, there's water, because they're trying to go for the truth.
Yeah,
yeah,
What is the
I
ground
100%
truth?
follow you there.
because if
Joe
you
Rogan talks about that a lot. He's an avid. His comedy store in Texas, actually, one of his big room is called Big. What are the bombs? I can't remember the bombs that were dropped. They gave him like Baby Boy or something like
Big
that.
Boy
Each
and
one of his
Fat
rooms
Boy,
are named after that. And it's actually called the mothership. That's how much he's
yeah,
in it.
little
He
boy
says,
Fat Man.
so when he talks about it, he's like, I want it to be true. So he says, I know I can't trust myself because I want
Yeah,
it to be true. I
absolutely.
do
Yeah.
think there is a place for that, though. I think there is a place for the human conscious to ask those questions, and then it has to go into the science to be proven or disproven. You have to have the
Yeah.
question. Is quantum computing real, or is dimensional travel real? We have to ask the question to be able to then try to apply science.
Yeah,
So,
Yes.
so I think that's important too. That we remember we need to bring up those sci-fi movies, and we're like, well, would that really work? Now let the science tell us. Let
yeah.
the data tell us. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, do you see in the near future? Do you see in our lifetime this massive reveal? You've seen so much, and you've seen things that others can't see, so don't have the privilege to see over, you said 61 years. So you've seen and in just the recent, since 2017, how much has happened. Do you see the big reveal coming soon?
I think that so let me put it to you this way: there might be a big reveal that could come about if we keep going on a political basis to put pressure on certain parts of the government that may have the answers. Going back to the contractors that might have been out there, if you could get them to change something, you might get a big reveal. If you have a a crash of one of these objects, that could be a big reveal, right? I
Yeah.
mean, a crash in some place, and you got that. So that could be a big reveal. You could also have the situation where, well, for some reason they seem to be communicating more with us, or we something, and maybe they choose to now say, "Here we are," or whatever.
Whether we like
You
it or
could have
not.
that, whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
You could also have a reveal from the standpoint that science works very, very slow, and it's the news cycle is very, very quick, and so like you'll have a sighting that happens, and everybody wants the answers the next day. Well,
Right.
science to investigate that might take months or years. I mean,
Right.
and so You know, so science is not going to be as quick to give you that, and we're trying to get the data. We're just now trying to get the equipment, and we're trying to get the funding to be able to do what we are trying to do, right? So the military has a little bit more funding, so they might be able to get to it a little bit quicker than we can. And then the question is, will that give the politicians the will to be able to now say something? And I go back to the point where, who are you going to believe that's going to give you the answers? And what is your end state goal here? Are you going to believe that everybody on the planet is now going to buy it? No. Are governments going to necessarily buy any announcement? Maybe not. Uh, what is it? What is the end goal of disclosure, if you would, of something like that, and how would that happen effectively and efficiently? And that's a struggle for us
Mhm.
because, again, we don't accept truth easily. We question everything. We want answers. Give me the proof. I can't give it to you, but we've, all that stuff has to work through. And I don't expect that to happen probably within the rest of my life.
Mm. Yeah. If it did, how do you see, the biggest thing that we hear that the government would keep it from the general public is that it would disrupt our lifestyle so much. Our economy would stop. People would stop going to work. People, I have a
Well,
I have
yeah,
a close friend. And we're talking about the Atlas, and I want to talk to you about that before we close. But she's like, you know what? I don't think I'm going to pay my credit card bill until this Atlas thing flies by, and I know that it's not the aliens. So, how do you think it
right.
would affect our economy and the way we live our lives, and religion too? I mean, there's
Well,
questions there.
there was a study called the RAND study, the RAND document that came out in the time period where Project Blue Book was. It was in the 50s, and they did a study that said, okay, well, what would happen to our society if we had a reveal? What would that be? And the biggest concern that they had was the religious beliefs we've got. A lot of religions are going to struggle with it. There's some that, like I said, that they believe that they're demonic, or that there can't be life elsewhere because it doesn't fit into my religion. So there's
Mm-hmm.
a cultural implication there of religions that are going to be greatly impacted in how that's going to happen.
See,
There are some that'll be open to it and very acceptive of it.
that's really
Uh,
interesting because I'm not sure if this is true or not, but I remember hearing somewhere that, oh, there's my cat, that back in the day, the belief that there was life on other planets was very common amongst Christians and other faiths because they believed that it would prove the existence of God because God would put life on all of these planets. So it was a common
Yeah.
Christian belief that there was life on almost every planet, and you've kind of seen that shift
Why would God
nowadays. Yeah, why would God leave him have empty planets kind of
have a
deal?
universe and only have one speck?
Absolutely.
What's the point?
Yeah.
Yeah.
right.
Now,
So
if these aliens do come down and they are, say, Islamic or Hindu, that's going to have massive ramifications culturally. If we find that
Yeah.
another
Mm-hmm.
well,
alien race
yeah.
believes the
So
same as some group
so
does.
we could, again, like we've been doing in this whole show, is we've been speculating. We don't
Right.
know what to speculate about them, and what they would do. This big reveal, what we now speculate about what might happen. What happens if these beings have been here scoping us out to try to find out as much as they can about it because they intend to annihilate us and take over the planet, or they have an interest in resources or something like that. My point is that we don't know. It's like, if you have an alien intent, what is the alien intent? How do they think? What do they think? We can't think like them. We don't know. We use our human thinking to try to make them into humans, and
We
they're
try to
not.
put them in our box. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Personify them.
so I don't know. I mean, are they there are some cases on the planet in like in Colares, Brazil, where they were shooting rays at all of the civils, all the residents of that island, and so that was showing that they were harmful. Where on other occasions they don't seem to be, they seem pretty benign. They don't seem to be harming us. So what's the big deal? There's
Yeah.
nothing. They could have, if they wanted to wipe us out, they could have done it. So why did they do it on that island in Colares, Brazil, where they were shooting at people and causing injury and putting everybody in the hospital and stuff like that? I don't know.
It's also a lot of
I don't
Yeah.
know. Was it
I think we as
so?
humans have an issue where we tend to unify certain things because we talked about earlier that what everything that's visiting us could be different alien species to the point where it could be some are alien species, some are time
Yeah,
travelers, some are interdimensional beings.
yeah,
And even then, if it's
yeah.
one, who is to say that these aliens are unified, this species? Because humanity certainly is not unified. We have drastically different foreign policies being a country. So it could be two factions of the same species. One of them is like, we have to kill all the non-us. The other ones are like, yo, let's try to talk to these guys. Let's see if we can figure something out.
Yeah.
In the abduction cases that are out there, it's always one of the things I've been very curious about. A lot of the abductees describe the fact that it's almost like that, the alien will show them like a television screen or something like a television screen, or a screen that's maybe invisible glass. Anyway, the point is that they're seeing the destruction of the earth, and whether it's climate or whether it's some other thing, it's the fact that they're trying to warn us the fact that this is what's going to happen on the planet. Now, that's a curious thing in a sense that there's a lot of consistency in a lot of these reports where they see that, right? So, is that my hope is that if they're concerned about nuclear, or if they're concerned about what we're doing on the planet and they're visiting our military locations and everything else, that maybe they would step in if we're about to just blow ourselves up
Right.
and stop it. I mean, I go back to the day the Earth stood still, where suddenly, nobody could fire weapons, and all the weapons around the planet, in that old science fiction movie, right,
Right.
were paused.
That'd be amazing.
Could that conceivably happen where they could do that because they're seeing that we're about to annihilate ourselves?
And
You know,
the other
and
side though, there's that one Twilight Zone episode where they have come down and they have the book on how to serve humans, and it turns out that's actually a
yeah,
cookbook on how to cook. It
Yeah.
yeah,
could be something could be horrible.
Yeah.
We don't know.
But we have to stay
exactly.
optimistic. I think.
We
I think
we
optimism is crucial, because the opposite tends to cause. Well, it's like Enoch and his little buddy that he was telling about the things that they saw. The first thing, they weren't optimistic that these things could be helpful. They were going to, let's go get our BB guns. And so that will only bring bad, whether they're good intentions or not. I think we have to have some sense of optimism and hope that, you know,
yeah.
that,
Yeah, and that's where I'm at. I'm more like that. I'm hopeful, and I
Yeah.
yeah,
and I and I believe that there's more good. There's not an evil intent. That it's more of a curious, or it's monitoring, or it's a surveillance of us, or something of that nature.
Well,
Not for the intent of good or bad. I mean, whatever, but just
yeah,
watching what we're doing and maybe interfering where they need to, or something of that nature. They might be doing that as well.
more than
And
likely, if they've developed like the ability to travel between solar systems or galaxies, they've
they want
probably they've probably reached a technological level where they've abandoned things like slavery and
sure,
war because those are the things. Now, war does tend to kind of ramp up our weapons technology, but historically speaking, you look at things like slavery and war and conflict, they tend to slow down technological development. And more
to.
than likely, they have not evolved with the sole ability to eat humans. They probably can eat other things. That's very unlikely. So,
Well, at the end of the day, if we don't have data and we don't have scientific proof, the only thing we can base it on is what we know, and we know humans. And if all humans were predominantly more evil than good, then we would have destroyed the earth long ago. So if we can base it upon that predominantly good prevails, then hopefully that's
yeah,
where we see there too. So I guess
yeah.
we are rocking in here on 2.5 hours. So we're doing great. So I got a couple other questions that I wanted to ask. Um, so, Rich, are you an alien? And if so, was Elvis an alien? And can you tell Would you tell me the truth?
As far as I know, I'm not an alien. I can. I've been recording my lineage and ancestry and stuff like
Yeah.
that, and I jokingly point out the fact that my mother, God rest her soul, she died a couple years ago at 93, but she said, "I'll believe in aliens when they come down and take you away."
Right. Right.
you know, so I don't think that I'm an alien. In the context of being from somewhere else, I can look at my lineage and say that I pretty much have got that under tow, and uh, I don't think Elvis was either. So
Mm. So, but you did say something kind of curious there. You said you looked at your lineage. If we think about the abductions, a lot of those tended to be some type of reproductive or some maybe hybrids. Is there? Have you ever thought of the possibility of those hybrids being like sleeper cells or people that are here that are interacting with humans that aren't alien, and maybe we've already have some of that DNA floating around in our human genome.
yeah, and again, it goes back to we can speculate that based upon anecdotal testimony, but not on any basis of any proof or any
Mm-hmm.
kind of anything we can do that. In other words, when I take a look at you, what would I be looking for? Let's say if you were a hybrid or whatever like that,
Mm-hmm.
what would I be looking for that would indicate that you have this other kind of like you know that you're
Yeah.
not human, but you're part human or whatever like that? Well, your DNA is a good thing that you might tend to look at, but your DNA tends to be more in the human category.
Right.
So I mean, it's like what proof would I have
Sure.
that you have you're part alien and part human, and so we look for those kinds of things, and we would have to do that in order to make that evident. And there's no evidence that supports that right now.
Right. So saying
And
that, I would like to really think we really got to hone in on this is a scientific thing that you and your group are doing. This is and we got to get away from some of the, you know, I like aliens. I want them to be real. So can you tell me over 61 years, what evidence, solid evidence that would lead you to believe that there are, now I'm not talking about just testimony or anything like it. Do you have like, you touch, and some of this may be classified, but have you touched something or seen something that scientifically gives you probably not a definitive answer, but would tip the scale toward most likely this is what we're looking at?
well, yeah. So I mean, I go back to the things that impacted me as a young 13-year-old and everything else, right? Was the fact that there seemed to be observations of by credible people that were seeing things that led me to be curious and led me to go look and dig deeper and try to get my understanding broadly of whatever that was. So I immediately began reading and studying, and I found out that there are that these cases are global, and that there's a consistency there. Well, that led me to believe it even more that there was like something to it, right? Because people are seeing it globally, and they're describing the same thing. So, like another step up from that is the fact that as I began investigating it, I would go talk to people who have had experiences, and they would be passing me photos, or they would be passing me a video, and that supported the fact that they were telling a testimony that there was something there, and they had proof that there was something, even though it was blurry, but there was something there, right? And that's what they wanted to tell me, right? So now I've talked to all these people, and I've gone out and and then I began going one step further in the sense that I'm now talking to military people, and the military people are telling me stories about my job was to go up and fly my aircraft and go chase these things with a gun camera mounted on the front of it and film it and come back, and they confiscated my film.
Mm.
Okay, there's another
So,
story, right? So, so, and then progressively from there, because I keep looking into it and I'm trying to be open to it, then I go and investigate a case where there's a 70-foot in diameter area where there's no wheat in the middle of a wheat crop.
Yeah.
and there's no indications that anything came into that middle area, and all the wheat's gone. Even the roots are gone in the center of the 70-foot area, and there's puffed wheat around the 70-foot diameter per area. And the only conclusion you can come up with, the fact that it was something from up there that came straight down, did whatever it did, vaporized wheat and the roots, and baked the soil, if you would. And so you're standing there, and you say, so for me, that's like, I don't have to see one to believe it. I've experienced that firsthand, and that's
You've seen.
evidence to me that
Sure.
that there's something legitimate to this thing that I need to be now looking at, right? And so, and then progressively up from there, now I'm talking to aircraft pilots that are chasing them and seeing things, and these things are moving at hypersonic speeds. And I'm going like, whoa, and we're tracking them on radar. So I don't have to see any one thing. It's
Mm-hmm.
my whole lifetime of looking into this with all those different experiences that I've had that have led me to accept the fact that there's something legitimately here, and it's in our skies, it's underwater, it's also in space, and now we are starting to get evidence that the same craft can be underwater, it can come up in the air, and it can go into space because we've seen them do transmedium travel.
Well, you and that you would think. I mean, if something can operate in space, you would think underwater would be not a lot of difference there. It has to be
Well,
contained.
Yeah. And so when we build for the water, think about it this way. When we do our development for water and something to move underwater, like a sub, right?
Mm-hmm.
We build it for that medium. We don't build that sub to be up in the air.
Right.
Yes.
We don't
There's
build it to go up into space. But I'm talking about an object like a disc-shaped object that's maybe 30 or 40 feet in diameter that can go underwater, move with incredible speeds underwater, can come up in the air, not impact the air, and go into space. The same object.
Yeah, that's
with
impressive.
no propulsion systems.
Yeah, and at rates of speed that we can't even comprehend, moving that and
Yep.
changing directions, so quickly.
Yep.
Yeah,
So that almost sounds like to me it's more so it was designed with a method of movement in mind, less so a specific type. Like it's not designed for water, flight, or ground. It's designed to go from here to there, and whatever circumstances it's in, it just so happens to work. It's not about, oh, this is about going in water. This is about, oh, this gets us anywhere we need to go. Right. Somewhat like we talked about earlier, the idea that it can more friction. Or maybe is moving through space, certain types of space we don't understand yet.
Yeah, and again, these are interstellar speeds. So we always point to we sent the Voyager out. Look how many years it took the Voyager. That thing is coasting.
Yeah.
And it's been building up over a long time to coast at that speed. It's not getting
propelling
to the point
itself.
That these objects are. These objects are going, Mach 55, 55 times the speed of sound. I mean, you're talking, and even higher potentially. And so now we're talking about objects that are just blowing our minds with their technology that don't match anything that we know of. Think about the material strength of these objects. Are they really interacting with our planet or in our air, in our water? Or are they somehow space and time kind of like
out of phase with our reality?
Yeah, out of phase. And so matter doesn't affect them.
Yeah.
They can go, they've been seen going through rock. Okay, so apparently rock doesn't bother them.
So why would air? Why would air and water? Yeah.
Why would air? Exactly. So, and then, people that see them when they shoot off, it's not like a combustion engine, which we have. We use combustion. We shoot something out the back end to go propel it to go forward, right? These things, there's no combustion. In fact, the people will see them right next to them and they shoot off. There's no repulsion. It didn't impact me. It's just gone, right?
Yeah. I had a kind of a wild theory once about a propulsion system that instead of being propelled, it would be a track. So you would have a place in space that space being anywhere in the universe, and you lock onto that spot, and by some form, you are attracted to that point. I thought that
Yeah.
would be thinking outside
Yeah.
the box. That's how we have to be,
Yeah.
because and if you see that as I get older, I see new technologies, new ways of doing things that 30 years ago we would be not even considered. This is just so that's one of those things, getting outside that box, I think, and being open. You can't believe everything, but you got to be open to it to be able to study it, I think.
And going back to the
That's
whole
right.
idea of I as a three-dimensional being can cast a shadow, a two-dimensional thing on a wall via interacting with three-dimensional space. Who is to say
Yeah.
that if I encountered two-dimensional
Yeah.
beings, I couldn't pick one up and then using my three-dimensional space travel to a point, drop it off, and in its mind it's traveled like significantly further than it should have been, but because I know a workaround in three-dimensional space. So maybe that's what this
Yeah.
fifth dimensional stuff is. It's doing a spatial workaround. It's saying, oh, these 2 points of space are super far from each other when you're working with this many dimensions, but when you add our dimension, you can just step over here. You can just shortcuts.
Yeah.
Okay. So I know it's getting kind of late, and how does your wife feel about all this going on? I mean, you got a full-time job, I'm sure, or you may be retired by now, but you're very busy. Is she a part of this? Does she, help with the conferences? Is she somebody that's, sometimes my wife is just like, okay, go do your thing. How does that work?
It, it's pretty much just that way. I mean, we respect each other's. You go do your thing. I can go do my thing. She's very supportive. She helps me at the conferences and things like that. She'll help seat people and do what she can.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, I mean, I'm blessed with having somebody that's very, very supportive in as a partner. And
That's great.
so she's not critical of what I do. In fact, she's usually part of conversations and things like that as well. But again, it's about the fact that we respect each other's interests and whatever
Individuality.
like that,
Yeah,
Absolutely.
individuality, and that's why we came together, right? So
sure.
it's very. We just got back from a cruise. We were over in Europe. We went from Budapest to Amsterdam on the Viking River cruise, and there was a one point where we went through Bratislava on the Danube, and I'm looking up, and there's a UFO kind of like restaurant up
Mm.
there, and I'm going like, look, there's the UFO, and then the next thing I know is like there were a whole bunch and there was one person I mentioned the fact that I researched those kind of things, that type of thing. Oh, let me get a photo of you. And the next thing you know is that there are some people on the cruise that recognized me from the History Channel, right?
Wow.
So now, then they started expanding. Well, that guy's on History. He's on History Channel. He does this, and he's a UFO guy. Next thing I know is I'm giving a lecture to the entire ship on the UFO subject.
Yeah,
And escape
I can
word.
imagine. I can imagine your wife
So
at some point.
I
You go
thought
to
maybe I.
Yeah. At some point, your wife's
So
like, "We're going to dinner. And I don't want you to talk about UFOs
yeah,
tonight." Okay, no,
exactly.
because it takes
And
over
she will
the
do that.
conversation.
Absolutely.
All right.
Right.
So the elephant in the room that I wanted to talk about before we closed was Atlas. How do you feel about this interstellar object, and some of the things that's being said about it by scholars? I mean, these aren't just the dishwasher and the grill cook talking here. Well, these are people who are very respected. Now they're being debunked back and forth, but the last thing I heard is that this object is projecting light instead of just trailing light. There's projectable light in front of it, which tells, of course, I'm not that but it does make sense, some of the things I'm hearing. How do you feel? What do you think? Are we getting ready to, what is this? Is this just a big rock?
So I don't know if you remember a couple of years ago, Oumuamua.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Oumuamua was a big thing, and you had Avi Loeb from the Harvard, who was saying that this thing is moving as if it's got some sort of like speed up that's going to happen when it goes near the sun, and it seemed to increase its velocity. Well, what causes that? Or it looked like it was elongated had some sort of like structure to it, and potentially it maybe have had a light sail. So you had, Avi Loeb, who's a respected astronomer at Harvard, who is now professing the fact that that was possibly an interstellar craft of some sort that was coming through our solar system and made some sort of change and did it. So here we are. And by the way, once again, we're doing this thing where you have scientists who will use their tools and will come up with a complete opposite perspective about what you may have published. So you run into a situation where not all scientists see things the same way. And so now you've got competition between scientists, which is what you're talking about. So Avi is out there saying that this thing is doing this, and he sees this, and then it comes into being where, as long as you're talking about data and not adding in confirmation bias as
Right.
well, then I'm okay with the fact that once again you can say that these are the facts. It has a light in front of it, or it's this. It's moving through. It doesn't have. It's not like a comet is. It doesn't have a tail. It doesn't
The
have this. It
speed.
doesn't have that. The speed is inconsistent with this. Do we really understand the universe yet? No, we don't. Do we understand all the things in the universe yet? No, we don't. We're still infants in terms of our interpretation of things like that. Hell, it's only you talk about generations ago where meteors were thought to be like, it's impossible to have a stone come from up in the air.
Right.
How do you get a stone up in the air, right? And so we're still very in our infancy. So what I'm encouraging is the same way we do with UFOs, is that all sciences use their respective tools and take a look at this object, and don't necessarily come to an opinion yet, but do the study and the analysis, and then allow for that comparison to happen before you make the pronouncements.
Yeah.
Now you have a situation where there's now the pronouncement, which has got the public all riled up and believing in, and the conspiracy kick in. And then you have all this other stuff where everybody's trying to prove it's going to confirm that that's what they are, right? And I'm saying, well, wait a minute, you need to study this thing and really understand it before you make that judgment. Um, he did the same. Avi did the same thing with some spherules that were over allegedly off the coast of Australia or somewhere out in the Pacific, and he believed that this was from a craft. Went out there, and we didn't find anything from it. I've had too many instances where I've built hope that we're going to get some revelation, only to be discounted as being something else.
Yeah.
So I too am hesitant about buying into that yet, but I am interested.
Yeah, definitely interesting.
Okay.
Even if it's not any type of
Yeah.
mothership or anything, it's still an interstellar object that's flying through our,
Yeah.
that
coming
And
from a
so
whole
again,
nother.
we'll learn about our neighbors or
Yeah.
whatever these things are, or where it came from, and that's a good thing. So I
Right.
encourage scientific exploration and study, and
Yeah.
we'll learn from that. But I don't jump to aliens necessarily yet. I'm skeptical, but I need to have more data before I do that.
Yeah. I think it really hurts the general public to hear someone at his level, say
Yep,
this, and then it come through,
it
and
is.
only so many times, then people are going to just stop believing
Yeah,
and stop caring,
exactly.
and then stop seeing as much
The
stuff.
sky is falling. The sky is falling. The
Yeah.
sky is falling. The sky is falling. And after a while, you just turn it off, and I don't want to hear that anymore. I
Sure.
mean, so there you go.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It goes back to that when we first started talking about the guy talking about Bigfoot, and people, it just discounts everything that everyone else. One small little incident in time can just damage years of people's, building, trying to make something valid. It's a shame.
Hey, look how many people still believe that the Earth is flat, or how many
That has
people
been
buy
a
into the fact
big
that
resurgence in that.
yeah,
It's
yeah, and
unbelievable.
how many people believe that we've never been to the moon, or And there are just a whole population of people that will reject anything. I mean, the 9/11. I just read something the other day where somebody believed that the Titanic never sunk, and it was
Yeah.
all just a fake story.
I
Yeah.
mean,
I'm going like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
so
There's
I
some
mean,
that's just
so
undeniable. The
is
moon,
obsession with
though, the moon one, though, I
there
have a
is
lot of
enough
questions about that.
evidence. There's enough evidence. Me and him have gotten this debate a
I
few
don't.
times. I believe we
I'm,
landed
I,
on the moon.
if you had to say yes or no, I would say yes. However, there is what is the area of so much, I can't think straight now. It was getting late, I guess, but we traveled through this area with radiation, and we weren't shielded
radiation belt,
enough.
right?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
they were saying that we didn't have enough shielding. There's questions that were unanswered, or unanswered to me. I kind of still wonder how some of that is. And
No,
then
I mean yeah, and so to me, it's like one of those things where it's like, in the early days when we did go to the moon, we did know about the radiation belt, and they did the best to be able to protect them. But what you find out is that these people are still impacted by radiation when they're out there, and in fact, they've had DNA damaged and some other things as a result of collisions in space.
Yes.
So yeah, they took a big risk going through that. They were moving at a speed that got them through it pretty quickly, and so they weren't exposed in a longer time. But they probably got a heavy dose of radiation, probably equivalent of like maybe 100 X-rays or something like that. My
yeah,
point is that it wasn't readily observable that they had damage, but they experienced damage. I mean, you
well,
talked about some of those people that were up there for a year and they've had damage.
well, just the fact that you talked about how quickly we moved through it. That's something that I've never heard. That we, yeah, there was the situation, and some people took some damage. That's something I've never heard either. So those are the questions that I like to hear. I want to. I hate just hearing. Sort of like, I'm sure you hate people, or don't hate, but it frustrates you when somebody just jumps to conclusions. As a scientist, you need and for me, as a person that's inquisitive, I want more details to the answers I get.
And so keep that up, Joe, because ultimately it's a situation where you always want to go to the source of information, the best source that you can get, and you also want to remain open, and you also want to be able to dig for the facts, because ultimately you don't need to hear opinions, you don't need to hear judgments and biases and everything else, but what can you get that's going to help you to understand that? And so that's part of critical thinking, which we've lost, by the way. And a lot of people are very gullible and believe everything that's on the internet and everything else. But my point is that what I did when I was that little kid was I actually got deeper into the subject and started studying it and learning more. And I can tell you this much: you can watch some of these, self-proclaimed scientists that want to be on TV, and I won't mention names, but the bottom line that they're always the big name scientists that were out there that were making these pronouncements, and many of them never spent 1 hour looking at a book on UFOs or something like that,
Right.
but they all have an opinion that they want to share about that, right? And
Yeah.
so I'm sorry, go do your homework first and then come back and give your opinion. But a lot of them won't do that, and
Yeah.
they don't invest, and so that's pretty sad.
They learn the trigger words, the ones that's
Yeah.
going to get
Yeah.
the views. Yeah. So,
Right. Suck scientists.
okay, gentlemen. So, Rich, I know your wife seems to be pretty understanding about what you do, but my wife maybe not as much. So I'm going to have to come to a close, because I
We
know
have
we
time
could
for
sit
one
here
more
for I could
question.
sit here. Sure, we got one more question. Go for it. Make it a
All
good
right.
one though.
So this is for me as a writer. I want to write some sci-fi. I love science fiction, as I've made obvious. How do I make an accurate alien species from your experience? Like, how would you just? What are the pitfalls of something that's inaccurate, and what are some ideas that could portray in your idea what might hypothetically would be more accurate?
Well, I again I go back to the fact that if I were to sit here and speculate about what these potential
Absolutely.
beings are. And by the way, the descriptions over history have been so varied that tells me that there's no one species
Yeah.
that you're dealing with. There seems to be multiple. So, like just down the road from you all, up in Grand River, you got Kelly Hopkinsville, and in the 1956, you had that whole family that was out shooting at them all night, and they were shooting at these objects,
Ouch,
with
Sean.
their it was like the Hatfields and McCoys down
Like
there. But
skeet
anyway,
shooting.
they were shooting at these things that sounded like that they were like metal, and that they would roll back and float in the air, and then they would come back again. So the bottom line is you have that kind of species. Then you have the Charlie Hickson and Calvin Parker one in 1973, where you've got this thing that looks like a wrapped mummy that's 8 foot tall, and everything else. And then you have these the other kind of beings where they look like us, that they have the big eyes, they're small, 3 or 4 feet in height, and they're
The
commonly like
Greys.
in closer encounters of the third kind.
Yeah.
The beings like that.
So
So the bottom line is that there's like a zoo
yeah.
or something out there that's made up of people that are from whatever, and it's hard to nail down like that there's only one alien here,
Yeah.
and that's what it is. It's like it looks like there's a whole variation of them,
So
Yeah.
and yet they're in craft that seemingly do the same kind of maneuvering or something pretty close to each other,
could be sharing
that they've
technology.
all got this. Yeah.
So make
And
something
so I
I
don't
think
know
it's
what to
fun.
tell you.
Yeah, make something I think is fun, and it's just as likely as anything else, is what I'm hearing, right? Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
I want to be an alien is just as likely as any other option at this point, considering how. Yes. Okay, that answers
How
my
varied
question.
they
Thank
could
you.
be. Yeah.
You're welcome, Tristan.
So I can't thank you enough for doing this, Rich.
That was great.
I hope that one day maybe Tristan and I will be down your area and we could do this in person. That would be great. And so you have the conference you have coming up. Do you have a date on that yet? The last time I looked, I didn't see a date for the next one.
Yeah, well, we typically have them the first weekend in June, so I don't know yet about next year where that's going to be, what's going to happen and stuff like that. We were having them here in Huntsville. There was some talk about potentially doing. So we're still in that questioning what do we want to do. There was a context of some potentially going up to Canada. There's some, Michael Lee was saying, well, we ought to bring him up here to Patty's.
Yeah.
I'm going like, or something like that, and so we're kicking around all these different ideas about what we want to do. And so nothing's in stone yet. Our website is explorescu.org, and we would post it up there, what we're going to be doing. And then we have the newsletters and stuff like that. And you can we have a contact page. You can get a hold of me up there as well and stuff like that.
So we're going to make sure, Tristan's going to make sure to get all that information
Absolutely.
Attached to this episode. And I think the one advice that I would give you from just an idiot in Kentucky is, it sounds like you got a lot of good researchers and you got a lot of good people on the scientific level and in the communities. I think you need some marketers. You need somebody to go out there and market to make the money the funds that you need to go for this thing and really go for it. So
I can write you a book.
I think maybe you should need a recruiting office there to bring in some marketers that can actually get out there. And there's so much money. If you could just get, an Elon Musk on board, can you imagine what that would do for your organization and the potential for that big reveal, So
no, I agree with you. We're not composed of people. A lot of us are scientists that are even on the board, and we're not business people necessarily.
Yeah.
So we don't go out and focus on, well, let's have a marketing campaign or something. We have a couple of us where we get press releases put out there. We do this. We try to engage, but we're so focused on the study, and we've got multiple studies that we don't really engage in how do we promote ourselves, and that's probably that's a gap that we've got. And then there's also a problem where we don't get very many people that stand up and say, I want to do this.
Yeah.
Or whatever. And it's not like we have the money to be able to pay an income. So it's got to be
Sure.
out of your pocket. It's got to be. And so volunteering is the way we all come together. We're all
Yeah.
volunteers.
Well, I tend to think sometimes too that in a situation like you're in, that you often said that you do a lot of this, you volunteer your time and your money and all these things. It almost comes out like it's a little bit of guilt. I don't want to make you don't want, and I'm not talking when I say you, I say generalization. You
Yeah.
don't want to feel like you're doing this to make money, but at the same time, you got to make money for the organization, to
Yeah.
grow.
Yeah.
So me and Tristan's going to be on board for that. We're going to try to help out and try to spread the word and maybe find that Elon Musk, or we'll go over and get Michael Lee in a headlock and tell him, let's
I don't think
let's
that's
find out
too
the
much
truth.
convincing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Michael Lee's
Well,
going to be on
thank you
probably
for
board.
wouldn't. It
that,
probably
because
wouldn't take much. Yeah,
Yeah.
you got to
we
schmooze
need
them. You
all
got to get out
all
there and schmooze people.
yeah.
So
We need all the help we can get, and bottom line is we love this whole phenomena thing. We're willing to share it freely. We give it away all the time. We're spending money on our own, out of our own pockets, to do this and that. And you're right. I mean, it'd be nice if we actually had some serious funding to be able to help us to do more. We could use a database. We've been wanting to get a solid database which has got all the stuff in it. We want to be able to use AI. We want to be able to use that. All that stuff costs,
sure.
Vince's
and
world.
so we that's where we are. But
Yeah,
I appreciate your support and having me on the show. So
absolutely.
Been a
Well,
great time.
for sure. There is a quote
thanks, Tristan.
from a show, and it says the truth is out there. So I
It is.
appreciate you looking for it, and hopefully we'll continue to make progress. And we're gonna really promote it for you as best we can. We'll get out there and work. And
Thank you.
I just want to make sure, Tristan, that at the end of this, you do your research and get everything we need on this episode.
Absolutely.
This is probably about a 3-week out before we get this all done.
It's going to be a fun
And then
one,
Rich
though.
we'll reach out to you so that you can you'll know it is coming out.
Sure.
And we'll do
Yeah,
some
I'll help promote
promotions
it.
too.
Yeah.
Well, we promote it. We'll have a little, we may have to talk to you about how you want to do that, because we can have a lot of fun with that part too. But it's been
Sure.
great having you on.
Hey,
Tell your wife.
And
Go ahead.
right before
Go
you're
ahead,
off,
Tristan.
Thanks for having Enoch on. It
Oh,
means
yeah.
a lot to me
absolutely.
that we have the young people getting engaged in this, and that's very that's great. Thank you.
Well, if
Of
you
course.
look at it this way, we had 4 generations, almost. Well, you're not that much older than me, but pretty much 4 generations of interest there.
Yeah.
We had Enoch
That's
and
right.
yeah. Just I don't know if he told you or not, but when we leave off here, don't close the tab, please, because it's going to be exporting the video. I didn't know if he told you or not. I was off for so long.
I've been watching it saying 99% uploading on the screen.
Well, that's good.
Okay, so we
It
should be
won't take
done
long.
then.
It won't take long.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have a really fast internet there.
All
It's
right.
because you're an alien.
Yes, I do.
Because you're an alien.
You have all the
Alien
tech,
world.
yeah. You're actually on your mother's
It's been great.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, it's been great. I'm going to go have some dinner and
Same.
enjoy your night. And I can't wait to get this out. And I want to do it again, absolutely. And I want to try to, when you get that conference, I want to be there. I want to come there and check that out. And I'll bring Tristan, and we'll bring Enoch with us too. So it'll be fun.
Yeah, all right. That's great.
All right.
Well, thank you so much.
You have a
All
nice
right,
day.
guys. All
You have a
right.
nice night, sir.
Good night, everybody.
Bye now.
Bye.
Take care. Thank you.
Thanks again.
What exactly happened down there?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I talked to him and blah, blah, blah. He asked about you guys and da-da-da-da-da, more questions, blah, blah, blah.